There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Honorable members, the first item on the order paper is member statements. Order, honorable members there at the back. Will you take up your seats? Thank you. Does any member of the ANC wish to make a statement? The ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. On the 9th of September 2022, the DA's de facto leader, Ms. Helen Zille, tweeted that, and I quote, "The DA has overtaken the ANC to become the biggest political party in urban South Africa," unquote. She came to this ridiculous conclusion from a poll done by a social research foundation. This is the same foundation headed by the highly subjective and biased Frans Cronje, the former CEO of South African Institute of Race Relations, which Helen Zille joined in 2019, which institute will remember for conducting a very questionable survey about racism, not a concern in South Africa, but only an issue of outrage. On the deeper inspection, according to the DA...
Order, honorable member. Honorable member. Let's set the tone now for this afternoon. You may hear things that you do not like, and you may interject, but you cannot drown the speaker. You cannot drown the speaker, honorable member. And I'm addressing you now, Honorable Cuthbert. You can interject, don't drown the speaker. Please continue.
On the deeper inspection, according to the DA, the poll was conducted among a sample of 3,204 randomly selected and representative registered voters, and that the DA is currently polling at 87% in urban areas, presumably defined as the country's 8th biggest metropolitan areas. Forgive us, we do not accord this latest survey any merit, giving this suspect information which fails to mention the methodology, the metropolitan areas sampled, where the poll was done, and the randomness of the sample. For the most part, the DA's governing urban municipalities via coalitions, with the ANC remaining...
Honorable member, your time is now expired. The DA?
Chairperson, South
Yes,
Africa
please proceed.
South Africa went to bed with stage 5 rolling blackouts on Saturday and woke up to stage 6 on Sunday. The resumption of stage 6 load shedding and the subsequent announcement by Eskom that it is likely to be with us for the foreseeable future highlights the fact that the ANC government are completely in the dark when it comes to resolving the electricity crisis. On 25 July, President Ramaphosa announced his emergency energy response plan, but little has changed since then. If anything, the situation has worsened as Eskom has now run out of money to buy diesel. This has had an enormous impact on our economy and the cost of living for ordinary South Africans. But the fat cats in the ANC government don't feel the pinch. Their lights are kept on at taxpayer expense. President Ramaphosa and his National Electricity Crisis Committee need to present a detailed roadmap of their plan of action with timelines and key deliverables. And then they need to be held accountable by this parliament for delivering on that plan. In DA-run municipalities and in the Western Cape, we are taking action to mitigate the impact of load shedding. This includes ensuring consistent water supply, sewage treatment, and power for emergency services. DA municipalities like Stellenbosch and Cape Town are actively taking steps to move away from Eskom and reduce demand on the SOE by procuring independent new generation and incentivizing the deployment of rooftop solar. This is something we should be doing across the length and breadth of South Africa. So the question is, why aren't we? And I think you'll find the answer sits on the ANC benches. Thank you.
The EFF.
Thank you very much, Chair. The EFF calls for the immediate firing of Eskom's entire board, including the incompetent and the useless Chief Executive Officer, Andre de Ruyter, and Chief Operating Officer, Jan Oberholzer. The incompetence and arrogance of Eskom executives have plunged South Africa into a perpetual and unwarranted darkness that is killing business and livelihoods. The collapse of Eskom and the failure to provide dependable and consistent energy supply are meant to render the country's electricity utility redundant and very useless. We have consistently warned against the immoral and dishonest intention of handing over South Africa's energy generation sovereignty to the greedy establishment that will influence all spheres of life, including the future of the country's political future. The lie perpetuated by Eskom's incompetent executive and so-called energy analysis is that the country does not have enough renewable energy to provide electricity when there is mechanical breakdown and maintenance, and that Eskom is cash-strapped. The reality is that the crisis facing Eskom is man-made. We warned you about the appointment of de Ruyter and Oberholzer, whose appointment was purely based on the color of their skin, because there was enough undisputable evidence that they did not have either the technical or executive experience to manage such a complex institution. If anything, the evidence
Honourable
showed
member,
clearly
your
that
time
de
is
Ruyter
now
failed
expired.
and de Ruyter must go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The ANC strongly condemns threats made by Advocate Dali Mpofu, the legal representative of Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, against Honorable Richard Janji for his refusal to postpone the sitting of the inquiry after the public protector fell sick, stating that Honorable Janji will pay one day. Advocate Mpofu went on to elaborate that his utterances was not a threat but a promise. We have all become accustomed to Advocate Mpofu's rants and raves and his degrading of the legal profession in recent years, as evidenced by his regular deplorable conduct in the courtroom. His sense of decorum is nothing short of shameful and disrespectful. He regularly bullies witnesses when they refuse to respond in the manner he expects them to. Even tells some of them to shut up, as he did during the Judge Zondo Commission of Inquiry, where he uttered those words to both Minister Pravin Gordhan's lawyer, Michel Leroux, and the minister. He was reprimanded by Judge Zondo for his deplorable conduct. He has now stooped to the level of threatening a chairperson of a parliamentary committee. We request that an investigation should be considered by Parliament in terms of the Powers and Privileges Act regarding the perceived threat, as no member of Parliament may be threatened while conducting their parliamentary duties. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. The IFP.
That's gossip.
Honorable House Chairperson, millions of South Africans depend on media, be it broadcast or written media. They increasingly use it as a source of information and consume that information under the assumption that it is impartial and objective. However, some members of the press operate outside these parameters and offer subjective and distorted information without context, opening up a space where non-factual and opinion-based information seeking to deliver personal messages are published as fact. This has opened up a dangerous space for misinformation and even defamation. The IFP respects and honors the right of everyone, including the media and press, to express themselves through their work, especially if it is aimed to empower and enlighten citizens. However, we are strongly against the breaking down of people's character because of personal vendettas, and doing so using powerful instruments such as the media. It is harmful to the subjects of this disinformation, as well as unfair and potentially harmful to those that depend on the media for news. The IFP, particularly IFP founder and President Emeritus Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, has been a victim to the brutal effects of slander and disinformation by City Press editor Mr. Mondli Makhanya, or Oscar Gumede as he goes by that name as well. We cannot allow this to continue to happen. It is something that should be addressed and, more importantly, dealt with. The avenues trusted to handle such issues have seemingly taken a very
Okay, the honorable members seem to have lost this connection. And this time was
Can I
almost up.
conclude the paragraph? I'm back. It was 2 lines left.
Yeah, just conclude, please.
The avenues trusted to handle such issues have seemingly taken a very passive approach with a total disregard for the responsibilities which they carry. Would like to remind the media and all press outlets, together with their regulatory bodies, that news should be impartial and objective, and anything outside that scope cannot be tolerated and should not be given a voice. Thank you.
Thank you. The FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chair. The Department of Agriculture has failed the farmers of South Africa, be it commercial, subsistence, or common edges farmers. The most recent outbreak of foot and mouth disease is but the last item on a long list of failures. Only during this past year, we have seen China ban the import of wool from South Africa, Europe increasing stringent measures in importing of citrus, leading to an immense knock for our citrus exports, to name but 2 issues. Thinking back to lockdown, the department knew better, did not heed my warnings, and auctions ended up being banned for 6 weeks, a ban the industry could not afford after the prior FMD banning of auctions. China's wool ban upliftment was not due to the department doing a good job. It was due to farmers taking matters into their own hands. And I dare say the citrus crisis will not be resolved by this department, and the current FMD outbreak neither. If it were not for farmers being an innovative, resilient people by their nature, this industry would have been in a more dire state. The time has come for the department to be serious, not only about food security, but about the plight of our farmers, big and small. We need a department that starts listening to its stakeholders. We need to see more effective disease management areas in provinces where FNB is not yet under control. We need to see an upliftment of the ban of movement of living livestock, but with better monitoring and disease control. We need the department to be better. I thank you.
Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chair. In his State of the Nation address, which he delivered in February this year, His Excellency President Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa said that government is hard at work to create the conditions that will enable businesses, both big and small, to emerge, to grow, to access new markets, to create new product, and to hire more employees. It was during the 4th South African Investment Conference 6 months ago when Sandvik pledged 350 million to the country. The launch of this facility is a fulfillment of the pledge. It is one of Sandvik's biggest and most advanced facilities global, consolidating operations previously undertaken at 5 separate sites at accommodating 550 employees. It serves as the investment in skills, technologies, and capabilities. The expansion of local product will make South Africa's economy more inclusive and create more opportunities for the new entrants into the industrial sector. We welcome the launch of Sandvik's 2022. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you. The DA.
Thank you. The issue of illegal land grabs has now become a major crisis across South Africa, placing massive financial burdens on municipalities as well as many private property owners. The announcement of the national state of disaster and the moratorium placed on evictions also led to a sharp spike in illegal property invasions across the country. In addition to the excessive costs incurred by safeguarding land under development, municipalities are obliged to provide additional basic services to newly invaded land parcels that have not been budgeted for in planning processes. Money spent on private security and servicing costs means less resources are available to tackle the housing backlog. The unlawful occupation of land also leads to severe dysfunctionality in cities, including the obstruction of infrastructure and loss of investment and value for property owners. A shortage of amenities like clinics, schools, and community centers close to invaded land places immense pressure on municipalities and surrounding communities. In terms of the current law, where eviction orders are granted, government is frequently required to provide permanent accommodation to land grabbers who have been in illegal occupation for longer than 6 months. This deprives law-abiding South Africans who are patiently waiting on the housing demand database of their opportunities. The situation is not sustainable, and urgent action must be taken by Parliament to amend the Prevention of Illegal Eviction from Unlawful Occupation Act. The DA's Private Members Bill, now
Honourable
gazetted,
Member, your time
will
is now
do
expired.
justice. I thank
The
you.
ANC.
I will start with 1652s.
Order, Honourable Member, you were not recognized. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. As part of community engagement program and as part of presidential imbizo which took place recently in Sidibeng district municipalities in Gauteng, 1,200 title deeds were handed to the beneficiary at Obed Mtombeni. The imbizo was aimed at assessing service delivery through the implementation of district development model to enable integrated and response planning, implementation, budget across all spheres of the government. The ANC called for the beneficiary not to abuse the opportunity they were given to own a house by illegally selling the public subsidized house, as these challenges not only for the government, but also beneficiaries who often became indigent again. The title deed is proof of ownership of an asset that should be handed over to future generations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The UDM. The NFP.
Thank you, Chairperson. The National Freedom Party notes with serious concern the plight of South African citizens living in mining communities. Oversight visits to the areas of Belcom, Roodepoort, Rivoli, and Rivoli Extension highlighted the shocking conditions under which South African citizens have to endure with very little or no assistance. Communities expressed their concern that for many years, politicians have been visiting the areas with no solution. Communities live in constant fear and cannot leave their homes from 5 o'clock in the afternoon until 6 a.m. the next day. It is not unusual for residents sleeping at night to hear underground activities, explosives being detonated, foreign nationals particularly patrolling the streets with AK-47 and R5 rifles. Residents in these communities are terrorized on a daily basis. Hijacking, rape, housebreaking is on the increase. Mining companies have benefited extensively from the minerals, have deserted these mines despite an agreement in place to rehabilitate these mines, and communities have not benefited from these big mining companies who have made massive profit. Despite the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, the South African Police Services, and other departments being aware of this problem for many years, the problem remains unresolved. Thank you.
Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chair. We welcome the recent launch of the Kwampumuza Skills Development Center in Ellenskop, Pietermaritzburg by the Minister of Higher Education and Training. This marks the beginning of the construction of the Kwampumuza Skills Development Center, which will cost about 105 million. And it is the first intra-SETA collaboration infrastructure project undertaken by the Construction, Education and Training Authority and the Wholesale and Retail Sector Education and Training Authority. The lack of training facilities to produce artisans in KwaZulu-Natal has been identified as a collaborative opportunity that has resulted in the SETA collaborating with WR-SETA to build a skills development center. The project would benefit the community of Vulindlela and rural communities in the surrounding areas, particularly the youth. Construction of phase 1 of the project is estimated to be completed in 2024. And about 175 jobs will be created during construction. The center will be constructed on the 27 hectares piece of land and comprised of administrative block that includes a retail business hub, engineering and SETA related trade workshops, fully equipped for technical training, warehousing, farming and agro-processing, as well as other agro-processing amongst others. Additionally, the college plans a multi-purpose center which will generate income for the center. Students will receive practical training and graduates.
Honorable
from the
member, your time is now
executive
expired.
Will be part of the staff complement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The DA.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Taipei Flight Information Region plays a very important part in the global aviation sector. The Republic of China Civil Aeronautics Administration oversees 18 international routes, 4 domestic routes, and 17 airports, providing a variety of civil aviation services, and is in a unique global and operation position to contribute positively to the geostrategic civil aviation ecosystem. These are just a few reasons why it is important that the International Civil Aviation Organization uses its upcoming 41st session of the Triennial Assembly to be held between the 27th of September and the 7th of October in Montreal, Canada, to engage with Taiwan CAA. The International Civil Aviation Organization develops common regulations and standards for civil aviation, which countries around the world abide by to ensure the safe and efficient growth of international civil aviation. As the Taiwan Flight Information Region forms part of the network of more than 300 flight information regions under the ICAO, it is important that the ICAO engages directly with Taiwan CAA, which is the sole entity overseeing the region. A DA government in 2024, a part of good government in South Africa, will support enhanced engagements between ICAO and Taiwan CAA because we are about job creation, economic growth, and think ahead to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you. The EFF.
Thank you very much. The government must not pretend that they are shocked by the carnage on our roads. The government, if it was innocent, people were not going to die in Pongola, particularly near Amakal-Latini area. Our people, including children, are dying on the roads that are broken, full of trucks, and should not be there in the first place. And policing on our roads is only reserved for the Easter weekends. What is shocking is that 19 school children were amongst the people who died in the Pongola accident, and the Department of Basic Education is quiet. In 2015, we were told that the National Transport Policy on Scholar Transport has been improved with the objective of providing safe and sustainable learner transport. Both the Department of Basic Education and the Department of Transport have the responsibility to ensure that the children have safe transport to go to school. If these two departments were serious about safe and sustainable transport for learners, they would have heard the cries of the parents in communities on the N2 crossing. The area is black spot with no visibility of traffic officers, and reckless truck drivers and the same roads have the school learners. We know that tomorrow there's going to be another tragic accident unless something drastic happens. Anywhere else in the world where people have a sense of accountability, the Minister of Basic Education and the Minister of Transport would have resigned in the shame. Thank you.
Thank you. The ANC.
The ANC condemns strongly in terms of the murder of a 47-year-old nature reserve worker, Amos Nhlanhla Makhaban, by him for Buffalo on Sunday. You know, it's so devastating, Honorable Chair. Mr. Makhaban, who is originally from Mpumalanga, died a painful death at the hands of his employer, who runs a nature reserve. His family is still having a hard time coming to terms to his death. The ANC calls for the police to leave no stone unturned in the investigation of this matter and to afford the family of Mr. Makhabani justice for his death. We are concerned that such cases as this are becoming common in our country. Unfortunately, the killing of black workers by the white employers paints an ugly picture of racialized violence. The ANC sends its condolences to the family and fellow workers of the nature reserve. I thank you.
Thank you. Al-Jama.
In the Eldorado Park, south of Johannesburg, young and old community leaders and activists like we last saw in the 60s and 80s during the harshest days of apartheid has been camping outside the local South African police station in the rain and the wind for 2 weeks because they're still waiting for the presidential amendment. Like Parliament and subsequent parliaments have shown no regard for the plight of El Dorado residents, like the residents of the Cape Flats and the colored communities all over South Africa. The so-called coloreds are the Cinderellas of the Rainbow Nation and punished by president after president because of the color of their skin. Not to have a black skin does not mean the presidency and cabinet ministers can make firm undertakings like the presidential intervention plan and do very little to combat crime, lawlessness, drugs, and gangsterism in El Dorado Park. Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chair. We welcome the recent opening of a swimming center by the National Sea and Rescue Institute in a rural town of the Eastern Cape. The NSRI has made a 6-meter long swimming pool available to villagers in Tombo village as part of a survival swimming center that will teach the community water safety. The new center is at an independent school in Tombo, the Noah Christian Academy. The village was chosen based on the National Sea and Rescue Institute statistics, which shows that the area has the highest occurrences of drownings in the Eastern Cape. According to the NSRI, Eastern Cape had the second highest number of drownings in the country after KZN, and they estimate that around 1,500 people drown each year in South Africa. More than a quarter of those deaths are amongst children. The center is built in a 12-meter shipping container, which features a 6-meter long swimming pool, an office space for the instructor, and a change room for the students. The pool is 1 meter deep, allowing small children to stand in it. As it is in a shipping container, the pool can be locked when not in use to ensure there is no danger of anyone entering when it's unsupervised. The swimming lessons are offered at no cost to the community, with a focus on teaching children in and around the village. We hope and trust that this will eliminate the spate of drownings in the area.
Thank you. Honorable members, that concludes member statements. Are there any ministerial responses? I recognize the Honorable Minister of Human Settlements on the virtual platform.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. I'd like to first acknowledge the statement by Honorable Powell for the issue around land invasion. We do acknowledge, Chair, that the issue of illegal land invasion remains a challenge. It denies us an opportunity as human settlements to be able to plan, but also I also want to urge that we should not conflate the issue of land evasion together with the process of land redistribution to the previous owners, because that remains a critical program for us as government. On the illegal occupation of land, we do believe, Chair, that currently, if supported, because majority of the problem is that municipalities do not have capacity to be able to act within the law, within the time frame that they are allowed to do the evasion. We have signed UN declarations and international treaties that also define how we should be able to treat citizens. And part of this work, that's why we will be hosting the UN Habitat Director in the country as part of dealing with global action against the eradication of informal settlements and slum dwelling, so that when we do evictions are done within the bounds of human rights. The other issue around the title deeds, thanks to the member of the ANC who raised this as part of the work that we have done in CDB. And we've been doing this across the country as we do presidential imbizo, but also as the visit between myself and the deputy minister, but also MECs, giving back titles to also pre-1994 households who were never given the opportunity to own a title deeds, but to own properties. It is overwhelming for majority of South Africans as they receive this ownership of their properties. And we believe this is a critical program that actually assists us in transforming the land ownership within the country. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize the Honorable Minister of Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture.
Ngibonge sihlalo ngibingelele kuwena nendlu. Sihlalo le nhlekelele yenzeke ophongolo inhlekelele embi. Sonke kufanele sibambisane sikhalisane futhi nemindeni elahlekile. Ngoba njengoba sikhuluma nje bahlele emanzini. Okushiwo ke ilungu lePhalamende la ngiyavuma ukuthi uhulumeni unomsebenzi ekufanele wenzile ikakhulukazi kwezokuthutha. Kodwa ke silikhuluma iqiniso. Abantu abashayela ngobudedengu ake sibagxeke ngoba inkinga yalapha labahlali bayasho ukuthi laba abadriver ama-truck badriver kabi. Uma ke singasho lutho kubona bazoyitshela ukuthi yonke into ihamba kahle ngakubona. Asilisi iqiniso la kufanele liye khona. Kodwa angeke nanini njengohulumeni sikubalekele ukuthi sinomsebenzi ekufanele siwenzile ukuthi abantu bakithi baphephe. Uyenziwa kuneyinhlelo futhi ezikhona. Musa ke lungu elihlonipheke kangaka ukuthi ungayi la inkinga ikhona. Hlala kuyona. Siyabonga.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Are there any further ministerial responses? There's no further responses. That concludes ministerial responses. The Secretary will read the first order. Before you read the order, I recognize the Honourable Chief Whip of the Opposition.
House Chair, while there is, the rules do not compel ministers of the cabinet, ministers and members of the executive from responding to questions or member statements in the House, it makes a complete mockery of member statements for only there to be only 2 ministerial responses when members come here to prepare to bring issues from the ground to the ministers in this House. Please, can this matter be looked into?
No, I want to concur with the Honourable Chief Whip of the Opposition. It's completely unacceptable. There's 7 opportunities for ministerial responses. We had 2 from the Honourable Minister of Human Settlements and the Honourable Minister Ntetwa. And that is a matter that will be brought to the attention of the Speaker, the Chief Whip of the majority parties here. And it's important that we do get responses from the ministers. This is a time that's dedicated for this segment. So we'll deal with the matter. The Secretary will read the first order.
Consideration of report of Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interest on 2021 Register of Members' Interest, late disclosures, contravention of Code of Ethical Conduct and disclosure of members' interest.
The Honorable B.S. Nkosi. The Honorable B.S. Nkosi.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interest hereby tables its report for the financial year 2020 to 2021. In terms of the disclosures, all members have complied except 4, and these have been communicated to and have responded to the committee in this regard. Some have offered apologies thereto and have undertaken not to repeat same. We are pleased that there is almost 98% compliance with the disclosures in this past financial year, which represents a change in the norm in this 6th Parliament. The report is so tabled. Thank you.
I'm informed that there is agreement that there will be no declarations taken. Once we have adopted the report, I will proceed. Order.
I will proceed to issue the reprimand to the members concerned as recommended. I now recognize the Honorable, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Enkosi kakhulu somlomo wendlu ebekekileyo namalungu. Phakamisa into yoba le ngxelo kuthethwa ngayo apha mayamkelwe yile ndlu. Enkosi kakhulu.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No. No objections, then agreed to. Now, honorable members, the charge of breach of the Code of Ethical Conduct and disclosures of members' interests for Assembly and Permanent Council members, which you have been found guilty by this House, is very serious. I'm informed that the members will be on the virtual platform and they will be required to switch their cameras on for the reprimand. Any members? What concentration? Order, order. Any member not present will be formally written to by myself, and that letter will be published in full in the announcements, tablings, and committee reports document, which is part of the official public record. Honorable members, the House has now adopted this report. And hold on, honorable members, order. The House has now adopted this report, and I hereby issue the reprimand to the following members. Honorable Elphas Buthelezi, Honorable Nkululeko Hlengwa, and Honorable Bonani Makubele. As members of this House, I thank you, Honorable. I can see you, Honorable Shengwa. I can see you, Honorable Buthelezi. I can see you there, Honorable Bonani Makubele. As members of this House, you undertook to uphold the Constitution and to act according to its principles when you took your oath of office. You also undertook to perform your functions as members of the National Assembly to the best of your ability. Order. Parliament has created, amongst others, rules and a code of conduct, which are intended to provide terms of reference for members when discharging their duties and responsibilities. The Code of Conduct sets out the minimum ethical standards of behavior that South Africans expect of public representatives, including upholding propriety, integrity, and ethical values in your conduct. The purpose of this Code of Conduct is to create public trust and confidence in public representatives and to protect the integrity of Parliament. In terms of the Code of Conduct, members are expected to adhere to certain principles, two of which are openness and honesty. Openness requires that members should be as open as possible about all decisions and actions, bearing in mind the constitutional obligation for openness and transparency. Honesty requires that members must declare private interests relating to public duties and resolve any conflict arising in a way that protects public interest. As stated by the Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interest in its report, CATC of the 7th of June, 2021, The disclosure of financial and other registrable interests is the foundation upon which the public is able to hold members of parliament to account. And it is through this process that the public gain insight into the integrity and ethical standards of the members of parliament and the institution of parliament. Thus, as members, we have a duty to ensure transparency in the manner in which we perform our functions and to guarantee that we remain accountable as representatives. By your breach of the code of conduct, honorable members, will you please take the process seriously? Honorable member, I'm talking to you actually. Please. No, don't do that. Just take the process seriously for once. By your breach of the code of conduct, you have undermined the principles of trust and transparency and further hinder Parliament's efforts to build and maintain public trust in democratic institutions. The reprimand is hereby issued. I thank you. Second order, the secretary will read the second order of the day.
Consideration of compensation for occupational injuries and diseases Amendment Act and of report of the Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labor on amendments proposed by the National Council of Provinces.
The Honorable M.L. Dunjwa.
Manibulise sihlalo wendlu yowisomthetho, ongqongqoshe abakhoyo, amalungu alendlu
Honorable Dunjwa, there's a deputy minister on the platform. Chief Whip, can you just reprimand the deputy minister? The Honorable Dunjwa is now on the podium and not that deputy minister.
Deputy Minister, can we have order? When we wanted you to respond to statements, we are nowhere to be found. Just close that thing.
Thank you, Chief Whip. Thank you. Order, honorable members, order. The Honorable Dunjwa. Order, honorable members.
Ngomhla wesithoba kwinyanga kaSeptemba ngo-2021, ikomiti lezemisebenzi nabasebenzi lathi thaca phambi kwale ndlu izihlomelo eyayicele ukuba mazamkele. Zamkelwa ke ezo zihlomelo zasiwa kwindlu ye-National Council of Provinces. Abathe ke xa besenza umsebenzi wabo ngokukhokhelwa ngumgaqo siseko, banezihlomelo abathi masiziqwalasele. Ezo zihlomelo ke zikumila kunje. On page 15 in line 51, after list, to omit 30 and to substitute with 60 days. The reason for that is to give stakeholders enough time to consult and communicate. Clause 43 on page 16 in line 52, to omit 2001 and substitute with 2022, because members will remember that the NCOP dealt with this in this year. Clause 63 on page 9, on page 24, in line 26, after domestic, to omit workers and to substitute employees. The reason is that on this one, all acts in terms of the labor duration, in terms of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act and LRA, talks to employees. On page 24 in line 28, after act, to omit again 2021 and substitute with 2022. Same applies in clause 64 on page 24 in line 34 after Act to also omit 2021 and to substitute with 2022. Siyawacela kamalungu alendlu ukuba azamkele ezi zindululo ukwenzela into yokuba abasebenzi baseMzantsi Afrika abasebenza emakhitshini nasezifama bakwazi into yoba bakhuseleke kwindawo abasebenza kuyo. Siyabulela.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Members, as there is no list of speakers, I now recognize the Honourable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, I move that the report be adopted by this August House. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration, the opportunity to do so. The DA.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. The Democratic Alliance has no objection to the amendments proposed by the National Council of Provinces insofar as the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Amendment or COIDA bill is concerned. In essence, they do little more than alter the year of the amendment bill from 2021 to 2022 and replace the term domestic workers with domestic employees. Even though the COIDA bill now includes domestic employees within the ambit of the compensation fund, which is a welcome development, it remains a fundamentally flawed piece of legislation. The DA is opposed to it for all the reasons that we set out when the bill was debated in the National Assembly just over a year ago. But what has transpired since the bill's adoption is deeply disturbing and merits attention here. The day after this House rose for the recess in September 2021, ahead of the local government elections, the Minister of Employment and Labour deliberately set out to undercut the thrust of the COIDA bill. He gazetted a series of draconian and irrational regulations pertaining to the compensation fund, which aimed to unstitch Parliament's legislative work. Earlier drafts of the COIDA bill contained a disastrous clause that sought, for no sound reason, to prevent medical service providers from ceding their occupational injuries and diseases claims to third-party pre-funders and administrators. The DA vociferously opposed the clause, as did various industry stakeholders. We all pointed out the great damage that its inclusion would cause. Medical service providers would have been denied their rights, injured workers would have been prevented from getting treatment, and employers would have been placed at risk for no rhyme or reason. Eventually, the offending clause was removed and the National Assembly adopted the COIDA bill. The legislation now requires third parties to register with the Compensation Fund in a prescribed manner within 6 months of the commencement of the bill, of the amended Act. Yet no sooner had the bill been adopted by the National Assembly than the Compensation Fund Commissioner published regulations, gazetted by the Minister, that effectively reintroduced the original clause by stealth. This move was underhanded. It was executed in the very worst faith. The Minister should be ashamed of what happened. He cynically abused his executive power to ride roughshod over the legislature. He sought to avoid parliamentary scrutiny and evade public oversight. Although the regulations were subsequently withdrawn, pending the threat of legal action, the Minister and the Compensation Fund continue to wage a war against third-party administrators. They are determined to prevent these entities from transacting with the fund, even though third parties are, for all intents and purposes, the only functioning link in the chain of administration regarding medical claims related to occupational injuries and diseases. The Compensation Fund is almost entirely dysfunctional. It has been dysfunctional for decades. Internal controls are absent. The changeover to the CompEasy system has been fraught with disaster. There is a massive backlog in processing claims and payments. Chaos reigns supreme, and nothing in the COIDA bill will do anything to change that state of affairs or to strengthen the compensation fund as an institution. For 10 years, the Auditor General has published disclaimers and adverse opinions on the fund. The Office of the AG has even indicated that were it not for the fact that the law requires it to audit the fund, it would have withdrawn from the task altogether. That's how bad things are. That's how deep the rot goes. So, as Parliament finalizes the COIDA bill, let's remember firstly that the job of fixing the fund and making it fit for purpose won't be solved by this statute. And secondly, Honourable Chairperson, the Minister should stop trying to scapegoat third-party administrators for the compensation fund's own failures and take some personal responsibility. Thank you.
The EFF.
Thank you, Chair. The EFF supports the committee report. The Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Amendment Bill was adopted by the National Assembly, and it is back because the NCOP proposed minor amendments, which we agreed to as the committee. House Chair, allow us to use this opportunity to raise more urgent and pressing issues facing the compensation fund at the moment. When we were processing the bill, we brought to the attention of the committee many shenanigans happening at the compensation fund and the conduct of the commissioner who treat the fund as his own private company and do as he pleases. This is despite shocking reports by the Auditor General, but because he is close to the Director General, everyone is willing to look away and pretend there is no crisis. A company called PLENARY Technologies, owned by a 23-year-old without necessary licenses and experience, is appointed for a contract of more than 200 million. The system that was introduced to solve backlogs, fraud, and inefficiencies has collapsed, and we are told that currently the compensation fund is not making payments on claims. The commissioner was at Scopa a week ago and told us that they have uncovered fraud by some of the employees, but to this day, no one has been arrested or reprimanded. The minister keeps blaming some shadow third party that seeks to collapse the compensation fund. And if he continues with this attitude, one day he is going to wake up to a compensation fund that is on its knees. And he is going to claim innocence like we didn't want him. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The IFP.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. The amendment of this bill has been a long time coming. This amendment represents a recognition by the government of South Africa's hard-working citizens in all sectors, from our mines to our homes. It acknowledges the reality of overcrowded court rolls and provides channels and changes for greater accountability. The amendment allows the commissioner to perform certain functions that previously were performed by the Director General, and a new chapter introduces the appointment of inspectors for compliance and enforcement. These inspectors hold power and responsibility as inspectors hold both power and responsibility as the compliance orders they issue ultimately becomes orders of the court. The amendments also represent constitutional victory for our country and citizens as domestic workers previously excluded from the protection granted by the Act have now been included. Employees are further supported by the bill as it provides for issues pertaining to the rehabilitation, reintegration, and return to work of employees following occupational injuries or diseases. These measures will compel employers to make sure that all the alternative avenues have been exhausted before commencing on the processes of dismissal. When the bill is enacted, the expectation placed upon employers is that they will revise the disciplinary practices in order to align with the bill. The time and capacity requirements for these revisions must be acknowledged. In theory, the aforementioned represents significant potential for overall positive outcome. However, it must be recognized that the benefits of this amendment are conditional on the capacity of our government holds for its effective implementation, as well as the integrity of the inspectors the bill makes provision for. The undeniable reality of our country is that we have top-tier legislation and strategy, but often stumble when it comes to practical application. The IFP supports this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chair. Honourable House Chair, the Freedom Front Plus does not support this amendment bill, nor do we accept the committee's report on the amendments proposed by the NCOP. Legislation is amended to address a certain evil. Though we do agree that domestic employees must be included under the protection offered by the Act, we cannot support most of the remainder of the amendments. The greatest evil that must be addressed at the compensation fund is not a legislative one. It is that of poor management, poorer administration, and the lack of accountability and consequence management. Die VF Plus teken ook ten sterkste beswaar aan teen die onderduimse wyse waarop die entiteit in die Departement van Arbeid en Werkskepping onder leiding van die minister sekere bepalinge in die wysigingswet probeer omseil deur middel van regulasies wat steeds derde party administrateurs se werksaamhede en die sessie van mediese fakture poog te voorkom. Hierdie administrateurs is dikwels die enigste partye wat tussen mediese diensverskaffers en die totale anargie by die fonds staan en sal samewerking met hulle eerder tot meer doeltreffende administrasie lei. No number of legislative amendments will eradicate the problems that injured workers and medical service providers experience with the compensation fund. It is a management and institutional culture problem that stretches right from the top, starting with the minister of this department. Fix the leadership first. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. The ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP is not opposed to these amendments as proposed by the NCOP, but has certain reservations on the totality of the amendment bill as expressed by other speakers. Clearly, domestic employees must be included. However, we share the concerns about third-party administrators that were initially in and then out, and the attempts through gazetting to remove the important role that they play. And clearly, of course, the disclaimers and qualified opinions by the Auditor General are hugely concerning and do reflect on the management of the Occupational Commission. Chairperson, what is important as we come out of a COVID-19 vaccination and issues and side effects is to note that in terms of a notice published last year by the Compensation Commissioner, in terms of Section 6A, the compensation fund will cover employees for injuries, illnesses, or death as a result of receiving a COVID-19 vaccine. And why is this important? Because if the commission is dysfunctional, how will they cover those vaccine injuries? And we know that as of April this year, there were 5,566 complaints received relating to vaccine side effects that had been lodged, but none had been paid out by the vaccine injury no-fault compensation scheme. Now, you would think an employee where there is mandatory vaccination would be able to claim from the employer. They're not.
Declaration from Good. The NFP.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The National Freedom Party does not have any opposition to this amendment. Indeed, we welcome the amendment, particularly on the added protection that domestic workers will receive. Our biggest concern, however, Chairperson, is, and I think we must appreciate the fact there are two different aspects to this. One is the amendments, but the other problem is the state of this particular institution, the compensation for occupational injury and disease. Now, it is no doubt about it that this particular entity is in a state of crisis, very poorly managed. However, I think the amendments that is quoted here, I think will go a long way in providing some level of protection, particularly to employees that have been deprived as a result of the common law right to claim damages against their employers, putting them in a disadvantaged position. A new chapter has been introduced to the bill related to the appointment of inspectors and regarding enforcement and compliance. The proposed amendments in the compensation for occupational injury and disease amendment bill have introduced harsher penalties, which must be welcomed, be levied upon employers who are unlawful conduct in connection with workers' compensation. Additionally, employees involved in an accident on a public road will now be required to claim from the road accident fund. The bill also introduced the concept of a multidisciplinary employee-based process to be employee rehabilitation, reintegration, and return to work processes will be undertaken. The National Freedom Party supports the amendment. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. The AIC.
No, Honorable Chair, the AIC support the report, but no declaration.
Thank you. Cope. The PAC. Al Jama. The ANC.
House Chair, siyabulisa kwendlu yonke baphathiswa nososwephu kanti nabo bonke abamemeleyo. Basibulisa sisamkela lengxelo yesihlomelo se-corridor bill. Kubalulekile ukuthi siqalise kuqala silungise iintetho ezenziweyo ezingaphuhlanga. Intetho yokuqala ithi i-compensation fund has been dysfunctional for years. That area was raised by us after years of silence by this party next to me. The negative audit outcomes of that fund were never raised consecutively until we raised them. What burdens them now is that the service providers who have been benefiting through that stealth of silence is that now they are forced to register and follow proper procedures so that they are able then to account not just to themselves, but also to the beneficiaries who are injured workers. Until such time that they comply, the new system that has been introduced is going to deal with them, Honorable Kado. House Chairperson has already indicated that on the 24th of August, we accepted the amendment bill dealing with all sections, that is clauses 39, 43, 63, and 64, which were referred to the NCOP. We appreciate the work that has been done by the NCOP, including ensuring that the bill is properly aligned to the Principal Act. House Chairperson, it is proper to give context to the process leading to this final day with regard to this amendment bill. On the 1st of June 2011, which is my birthday, in Geneva, the International Labour Organization convened its 100th General Assembly, and in line with the commitment of promoting decent work, in line with its Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work and Declaration on Social Justice and Fair Globalization, which was adopted on the 16th of June in 2011. As part of that 100th Assembly,
Convention 189, which is commonly referred to as the Domestic Workers Convention, was adopted. This groundbreaking convention outlines a set of measures that member states must follow in the event that they adopt that convention. The various articles that outline key provisions that we need to note for this day, that include that Articles 13 and 14 of this convention clearly outlines the step that must be undertaken that includes declaring that every domestic worker has the right of a safe and healthy working environment, which is what is captured on Article 13. The second area that is important is captured on Article 14, that goes to ensure that domestic workers enjoy conditions no less favorable than those applicable to workers generally in respect of social security protection, including with respect to maternity. It goes further, House Chair, to include Article 11, which also talked to the issue of the introduction of national minimum wage, a progressive step that we have already covered as this progressive government. House Chairperson, the DA has many problems, big and small. One of these many problems of the DA is the inability to see the bigger and broader picture, which has been seen by the ILO. Secondly, the DA has constructed for themselves this narrow and selfish path, underpinned by their neoliberal ideology, which advocates for few to benefit whilst excluding the majority and the downtrodden in particular. Theirs is a deregulated market that allows for markets to prevail at the expense of blood and sweat of workers, worst of those who are the ones who are in fact working in their households. Omeri no Jane, bahleli phantsi endleleni bakhanyela apha eParliament. So it is very difficult to listen to DA because they are the alarmist of note, and they care less about the majority of South Africans who are vulnerable. Their interest is more on those who are comfortably making money at the expense of those who are used and exploited, whose life and limb in the process of that, who lose the life and limb in the process of that profit maximization. As we speak, House Chair, there are some employers who dismiss employees on the basis of occupational injuries and diseases, which were sustained at the workplace. The amendments introduce rehabilitation, reintegration, and the return to work of those employees to cushion them from the inhuman practice of the employer. For a very long time, honorable members, domestic workers were excluded from the definition of the employee. The amendments are now saying domestic workers are also employees, and therefore the coverage of occupational injuries and diseases, as well as the improvement of compensation benefits to employees, must reach these previously excluded vulnerable workers. The DA's objection to the entirety of the bill is really a demonstration for all to see how brutal and vicious that party can be. Just listen to this one. Clause 43 seeks to amend Section 73 of the Act to expressly provide for the reopening of the claims that after the expiry of the 2 years, that is in the incidence of accidents, which the DA vehemently opposes. House Chairperson, part of Clause 43 is simply aimed at regulating service providers, with a point that I've covered earlier on, who prey on innocent workers when injured and submit claims to the compensation fund. It is simply asking for their true identities, their organizations and companies. It imposes an orderly, regulated, and responsible process. The DA has a fictitious side, which was presented by Honorable Kato here with regard to Clause 43. House Chairperson and honorable members, when it comes to these amendments being practically implemented without any unintended consequences, we have looked deeper into that, and as we refused to look.
Honorable member,
at all the
your
stakeholders,
time has now expired. Thank you.
ANC supports the bill.
Order, honorable members. Order. Are there any objections to the motion as moved by the Chief Whip of the majority party that the bill as amended be passed? Are there any objections?
Please note the objection of the Democratic Alliance.
Objection will be noted.
And
Honorable
the
members,
object-
order.
And the ACDP, thank you, Chair.
The ACDP
As well as the FF plus, please, Chair.
and the FF plus. Honorable members, with those objections, the amendments is agreed to. The bill will be sent to the President for assent. The Secretary will read the third order.
Consideration of draft notices determining the salaries and allowances of public protector, deputy public protector, and commissioners of South African Human Rights Commission with effect from 1 April 2021.
I now recognize the chairperson of the committee, the Honorable Magwanishe, who will introduce the report. The Honorable Magwanishe. Is the honorable member on the platform? Thank you, honorable members, honorable members, honorable members. It seems to me the member has difficulty getting onto the platform. I now recognize another member of the committee who will introduce a report.
Honorable Chair, in the case of the public protector versus the mail and guardian and others, the court made the following remarks. The constitution upon which the nation is founded is a grave, solemn promise to all its citizens. It includes a promise of representative and accountable government functioning within a framework of pockets of independence that are provided by the various independent institutions. One of these independent institutions is the Office of the Public Protector. The Office of the Public Protector is an important institution. It provides what will often be a last defense against bureaucratic oppression and against corruption and malfeasance in public office that is capable of insidiously destroying the nation. If that institution falters or finds itself undermined, the nation loses an indispensable constitutional guarantee. Chairperson, the preamble of the Constitution of South Africa contains the commitment to, amongst other things, establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights, lay the foundation for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law, and improve the quality of life of all of its citizens and free the potential of each person. The Commission for the Remuneration of Public Representatives makes recommendations for members of the executive, provincial legislatures, councillors, traditional leaders, and Chapter 9 office bearers. In making its determination, the Remuneration Commission considered submissions from stakeholders, the fiscal condition of the state, the wage bill, the impact of the salary increment on the fiscus and the general economic status of the country. The Remuneration Commission recommended a 3% increase. The President then considered that report and submitted his determination to the Speaker of the National Assembly. The determination is with effect from the 1st of April 2021. The relevant office bearers of Chapter 9 institutions, which are linked to the Department of Justice and Correctional Services requiring the approval by this august House are the Public Protector, the Deputy Public Protector, the South African Human Rights Commission Chairperson, the Deputy Chairperson, full and part-time commissioners. We table this report for endorsement. I thank you.
Honorable members, I will now recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration, the opportunity to do so. The DA.
House Chair, both of these institutions, the Public Protector and the Human Rights Commission, were established in terms of Chapter 9 of the Constitution with the primary aim and purpose of strengthening our constitutional democracy. The Constitution also determines that these institutions are independent, subject only to the Constitution and the law, and that they must be impartial and must exercise their powers and perform their functions without fear, favor, or prejudice. Other organs of state, through legislative and other measures, must assist and protect these institutions to ensure their independence, impartiality, dignity, and effectiveness. One of the ways in which this is done, House Chair, is through the annual appropriation and the approval of remuneration of office bearers of these institutions. We are very worried, and when I say so, I do this in the spirit of supporting these institutions as potentially invaluable constitutional instruments, about the independence and the impartiality of these institutions, and whether their duties and functions are always being performed in such a manner that our constitutional democracy is being strengthened and supported. We are very worried that the Human Rights Commission is unfortunately seen as ineffectual in relation to its primary function, as set out in the Constitution, namely the monitoring and assessment of the observance of basic human rights. The right to access to sufficient food and water, as enshrined in the Bill of Rights, has been trampled on over many years by the ineptitude, the maladministration, and the corruption that characterizes this ANC government. As we speak, House Chair, 80% of South African households now skip at least one meal a day, and 40% of households face a real struggle to put food on the table. 1 in 5 South Africans do not have access to clean water. 20% of schools have no access to water, and 45% of clinics have no access to water. Yet, what we are being faced with is silence on the part of the Human Rights Commission. Our plea to this commission today is to, for once, display a real commitment to their constitutional role and use their powers to take to task this government that has allowed access to clean water and sufficient food of South Africans to slide backwards in a significant manner. Our plea to the Public Protector is to give all complaints it received the same attention, not only those high-profile political complaints. Please remember that you are a vital instrument in ensuring equality before the law for ordinary South Africans. It is for this purpose that you both exist, and it's for this purpose, Chair, that we begrudgingly support the remuneration of these institutions. I thank you.
Thank you. The EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Order, honorable members.
Chairperson, Chapter 9 institutions are crucial for the health of our democracy. They serve as a constant reminder to those in power that the exercise of that power must always be within the law. The Office of the Public Protector has been relentless in its pursuit of justice for the poor and for the marginalized, and insistent on having the executive and other government departments honor their legislative and policy mandates. It is for this reason that the women and men who lead these institutions must be women and men of unflinching moral status, who refuse to be used by the executive to hide their flirting with illegality. Equally, these women and men must be remunerated sufficiently. The report of the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services indicates that the Independent Commission on the Remuneration of Public Servants recommended that the remuneration of the Public Protector, Deputy Public Protector, and Commissioners of the South African Human Rights Commission be increased by 3% with effect of April 2021. The President has accepted this recommendation, and we too shall accept it. We are of the view that these adjustments are necessary, taking into account these difficult economic times that we are currently on. We also want to take this opportunity to recommend and to commend the excellent work done by the Public Protector, Advocate Usisiwe Mkhwebane, up until she was removed from office by the President in a manner the Western Cape High Court described as unlawful. As people who admire her work, we cannot wait for her to get back to the office and lead that institution in investigating all cases lodged with an impartial and fearless manner, without regard for the office of those who are investigated occupy. The Deputy Public Protector has many lessons to learn from Advocate Mkhwebane in this regard, and she can demonstrate her impartiality by stop dancing to the tunes of the executive and release the report on the Phala investigation without delay. So therefore, we support this report. Thank you.
Thank you. The IFP. The IFP.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I was waiting for one more time because my members surprise me sometimes. They come on when I am sitting in the front. Honorable Chairperson, South African law and the Constitution provide a comprehensive and dependable framework through which to determine the salaries and allowances of those who lead and capacitate our Chapter 9 institutions. As the IFP, we honor the rigorous framework and legal due diligence paid to the process of determining these allowances, and therefore we approve these salaries. The Public Protector and the South African Human Rights Commission have been established to promote rights and to strengthen our constitutional democracy. They play one of the most vital oversight roles in our government and in society, with a particular focus on the rights and lives of our citizens and the South African public. The tasks set out before both those in the Office of the Public Protector and those in the Human Rights Commission are far from easy, but could not be more important. In South Africa's history, we have seen the power these institutions can have to redeem and rectify injustice. Therefore, we understand and support the need for significant financial capacitation. This said, our acceptance comes with expectations. These expectations are not only those of the IFP, but represent the reasonable expectations of all South African citizens. Chapter 9 institutions give substance to the constitutional rights of the South African people. The salaries being accepted must be used to ensure that good, competent people with integrity are put in place within these institutions. These salaries must be used to capacitate those within these roles to exercise their powers and perform their functions without fear, favor, or prejudice. The salaries and allowances must be seen as a representation of the importance placed on these roles and must be a statement about the need for competence within Chapter 9 institutions. They must also be seen as a way to hold those in positions accountable for the work that they must do. We believe that these salaries have the potential to minimize the risk of corruption and are able to fully capacitate those within these roles to perform to the highest standards. The IFP accepts the report. Thank you.
Thank you. The FF Plus.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. The old South Africa was a parliamentary sovereignty in which the role of Parliament was supreme. The new South Africa is a constitutional democracy in which the Constitution is supposed to be supreme. The founders of the Constitution created 6 new institutions as well as the provisions of the Public Protector to strengthen constitutional democracy in South Africa and guaranteed their independence as institutions. These institutions should be impartial and exercise their powers and perform their functions without fear, favor, or prejudice on the basis that they are subject only to the Constitution and the law of South Africa. Voorsitter, slegs op hierdie veronderstelling sal die VF+ die bepaalde verslag steun. Dankie, voorsitter.
Thank you. The ACDP.
No declaration. Thank you.
Thank you. The UDM, ATM, good. NFP.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. The National Freedom Party supports the 3% salary increment for all public officers for the financial year 21-22. That's particularly the Public Protector, Deputy Public Protector, and Commissioners of the South African Human Rights. A very important office, of course, of the Public Protector. Although, Chairperson, I want to raise the fact that at least, the 350 rand that is allocated to people in this country relying on some form of social assistance has gone up to about 30 million people in this country, which is quite a vast sum. And more importantly, I think 56% of our people in this country live with a salary or some form of income of less than 1,300 rand a month. So whilst 3% is not a lot, particularly for the Office of the Public Protector and the tasks before her, the National Freedom Party will support this. Thank you.
The AIC, COPE, the PAC, Al-Jama, and the ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I just rise to do a few things. Honorable Werner Horn, you can't be supporting it grudgingly. You've got to support this increase. It's the same 3% that we also got. Please support it without any conditions as a belief down. Just doing that as a belief. And I must just make this point to the economic freedom fighters. The president has not removed the public protector. The public protector has been suspended in terms of section 1.
Order, honorable members. Order. Order, honorable members. Honorable members, give the member on the floor an opportunity to be heard, like you were heard.
In terms of section 194, subsection 3A, that's a suspension. There's no removal, so that the record is set straight here. Otherwise, we rise to support this as the ANC. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable members, are there any objections to the approval of the draft notices determining the salaries and allowances of the public protector, the deputy public protector, and commissioners of the South African Human Rights Commission with effect from 1 April 2021 as it appears on the order paper? Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The secretary will read the fourth order.
Consideration of draft regulations of Critical Infrastructure Protection Act 2019, Act number 8 of 2019.
I now recognize the chairperson of the committee, the Honorable Jumat Peterson, who will introduce the report.
Baie dankie, agbare voorsitter, agbare hoofsweep van die meerderheidspartij, agbare Majodina. Laat my toe om volgens my inleiding vir u te bedank vir die wonderlike manier wat u ons almal aangebied het om ons kulturele verskillende kulturele aspekte uit te beeld in hierdie parlement. Jaarliks op 24 September word Erfenisdag gedenk in ons land. Agbare hoofsweep, u het elke Suid-Afrikaan die reg in hierdie parlement gegee om ons erfenis uit te lewe en uit te lig. Nasionale kollektiewe erfenis is om 'n identiteit as 'n Suid-Afrikaan te hê en ek wil u bedank vir daardie geleentheid. The protection of critical infrastructure has intensified internationally, largely due to the increasing threat of terrorism. Preventative security measures have become a major focus area of the protection, safeguarding, and the resilience of physical critical infrastructure in South Africa and abroad. The 2019 Critical Infrastructure Protection Act was assented to by the President on 20 December 2019, and it repealed the outdated National Key Points Act of the apartheid government. Through the adoption of the Act, the protection of critical infrastructure was brought in line with our democratic and constitutional values of transparency, openness, and accountability. The Act provides for guidelines and factors to be taken into account to ensure that the transparent identification and declaration of infrastructure according to Section 2017 of the Act. It provides that the Minister of Police must table any proposed regulations in Parliament for security promulgated by us. On the 21st of July, the Speaker of the National Assembly referred the draft regulations to the Portfolio Committee on Police for consideration and report. The committee has considered the 14 aspects contained in the draft regulations and subsequently adopted this report. The committee proposed 3 amendments to the draft regulations, which were taken on board by the department and included in the regulations. The definition of applicant now includes the National Commissioner, as he can apply for the declaration of infrastructure and critical infrastructure, as subsequently the definition also includes Section 18 of the Act. Further thereto, the committee included that the submission by the Council to the Minister of Police must include submissions by the head of a government department in terms of Section 18, subsection 3B. These amendments undoubtedly strengthen the regulation and implementation of the Act and illustrate the importance of parliamentary involvement in the legislative process. The opposition will undoubtedly raise considerable concerns about the slow pace in which the council is appointed and vetted. And although we share those concerns, we are confident that the process will be completed soonest and that the department and ministry are hard at work to address any and all stumbling blocks in this regard. I want to state categorically that there is no unwillingness from government to ensure that the council is appointed and becomes operational. The main principle and the main thrust of openness and transparency of the Act is the appointment of the council, and we will ensure that these draft regulations and regulations are implemented and that the Critical Infrastructure Council indeed determines on these regulations. Parliament held interviews with candidates from the private sector, civil society, and we nominated the most suitable candidates and individuals which were appointed by the minister. These candidates hold both individually and collectively vast knowledge and experience. We wish the council all success. We will support them, and we call on the minister to fast track the finalization of the council, the implementation of the Act and the regulations. I thank you. Baie dankie.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I will now recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration. The DA. Switch on your microphone, please. Thank you.
Ek gaan dit weer oor sê, baie dankie voorsitter. Ek gaan ook in goeie Afrikaans begin. Chairperson, internationally, the protection of critical infrastructure has become pivotal, largely due to the increasing perceived risk or threat of terrorism. In South Africa, we have witnessed the utter destruction of our own national parliament by fire, which can mainly be attributed to the failure on the part of government to properly secure our existing critical assets. Now, we have heard that the new Critical Infrastructure Act, Act number 8 of 2019, was ascended to by the President on the 20th of December 2019. This will not only fill the gap, but also to replace the old National Key Point Act due to mounting criticism leveled against it. In 2013, the Right to Know campaign, amongst others, made an application to the High Court of South Africa, Gauteng Local Division, pressurizing the Minister of Police to release the list of NKPs, a request he initially refused. He was subsequently ordered by the court in 2014 to release the requested information. Now, certain administration processes must be followed by the minister before the promulgation of the CIPA regulations. However, The conclusion of these processes has dragged exceedingly and was clearly handled in a laissez-faire manner. Nou, ons minister van polisie het 'n gewoonte om nie datums te haal nie. Mense wat op bepaalde posisies aangestel moet word, dit kan maar 'n jaar of so omtrent later gaan en dan is daar nog steeds geen haas om dit af te handel nie. The Portfolio Committee on Police already commenced on the 7th of June 2021 with the interviews of shortlisted candidates for the Critical Infrastructure Council. And still today, this council has not been appointed. Work cannot start. Apparently, there is no urgency to get this sorted. The committee's recommendations were forwarded to the state president, and the process can only be completed once Parliament finally approves the draft regulations. On the 21st of July 2022, the Speaker referred the draft regulations to the Portfolio Committee on Police for consideration and reporting. Committee agreed with the recommendations. Certain changes were made to the amendments were made, and the report was referred to the National Assembly for consideration. This is what we're here for today. The DA support the report. I thank you.
Thank you. The EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the country is experiencing a coordinated and well-organized sabotage effort from groups that should be well known to the police and intelligence, if we had any in this country. The protection of critical infrastructure is crucial, not just to the provision of services to the people, but also to the development of our country. PRASA is the most glaring example of this crisis that the country finds itself in. The country's rail network has all but collapsed, and this collapse is organized and perpetrated by organized groups fully known to those in leadership of the country. The Critical Infrastructure Protection Act is important for those purposes. It set out to provide legislative mechanisms for the protection of critical infrastructure in the country. Section 16 of the Act deals with the requirements for the declaration of infrastructure as critical infrastructure. As set out in subsection 16(1), infrastructure qualifies as critical infrastructure if, number one, the functioning of such infrastructure is essential for the economy, national security, public safety, and the continuous provision of basic public services. And two, the loss, damage, disruption, or immobilization of such infrastructure may severely prejudice the functioning or stability of the country, the public interest with regard to safety and the maintenance of law and order and national security. We therefore welcome the regulations giving effect to some of these provisions of the Act. We must, however, emphasize that the main problems in the country do not relate so much to the lack of legislation, but to the incapacity of the state to enforce security and maintain law and order. The police and intelligence services who thoroughly corrupted and have been rendered useless by the political leadership of the country. These problems will not resolve the regulations and legislation, but by presence of competent personnel within the SAPS. We welcome these regulations and hope that they will move us a step closer to protecting critical infrastructure in the country. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The IFP.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. The physical and cyber protection of infrastructure that is critical to the economy, security and public safety of South Africans is of utmost importance. The very first purpose listed in the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act is to secure critical infrastructure against threats. Recently, we have gained first-hand experience of the damage that can be caused due to a lack of protection for critical infrastructure. As in the case of the fire that broke out at Parliament, infrastructure is in the case of the fire that broke out of Parliament. If the importance of this piece of legislation is not yet clear to you, I urge you to take a walk to the National Assembly chambers and view the extent of the damage. In consideration of the report, the IFP wishes to reiterate the importance of the Critical Infrastructure Council, especially in relation to the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution. South Africa's critical infrastructure has experienced cyber attacks that have thus far only had minimal impact. These include the attack on Johannesburg municipal electricity system, which largely affected the billing rather than other technical operations. However, what if a similar attack was aimed at ESCOM? Does South Africa have the necessary security capabilities to protect its critical infrastructure? It is not a secret that security risk to a monolithic state-owned entities with a backup would rather exacerbate the country's existing power supply insecurities. It is our recommendation that the South African Police Service and the State Security Agency work closely together to further capacitate the Minister and the Critical Infrastructure Council once it is appointed to address any existing vulnerabilities in the protection of critical infrastructure. The IFP accepts the report. Thank you.
Thank you. The FF Plus.
No declaration, Chairperson.
Thank you. The ACDP. Order, Honorable Schlengwa, the honorable member next to you want to speak.
Thank you. House Chairperson, the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act of 2019 was assented to by the President on 20th December 2019. As per Section 27 of this Act, the Minister of Police was required to table any proposed regulations in Parliament for scrutiny before promulgation. This was done as the Speaker of the National Assembly referred the draft regulations to the Portfolio Committee on Police for consideration and report. During the public participation process, a number of interest groups made submissions to the committee. Among them was the International Committee of the Red Cross, and during their submission, they, among other things, appealed to Parliament to reconsider deletion of Section 1(4) of the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorism and Related Activities Act of 2004. They proposed that a humanitarian exemption clause be introduced in the Podatara Act to ensure that impartial humanitarian organizations acting in accordance with international humanitarian law can carry out humanitarian activities without fear of prosecution by state authorities. The ACD supports the work of impartial humanitarian organizations that provide humanitarian assistance such as food and medicine to civilians and wounded belligerents living in areas controlled by non-state armed groups. The ACDP further agrees that without a humanitarian exemption clause, exclusively humanitarian activities protected under the international humanitarian law, whose objective is to reduce human cost of the conflict, might be criminalized as a form of support to groups and individuals designated as terrorists. The ACDP further supports this appeal based on the fact that states across the world, including Africa, have clauses similar to what the International Committee of the Red Cross is requesting. South Africa has long championed the importance of including saving clauses within international counterterrorism instruments, ensuring that actions conducted by movements waged by people during an armed conflict
are not labeled as terrorists if those actions are lawful under international humanitarian law. The ACDP will support this report.
The UDM, ATM, good. The NFP.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the CIP Act provides that infrastructure is considered critical infrastructure if the functioning of such infrastructure is essential for the economy, national security, public safety, and the continuous provision of basic public services. And the loss, damage, disruption, or immobilization of such infrastructure may severely prejudice the functioning or stability of the Republic, the public's interest about safety, and the maintenance of law and order and national security. The Act, once in full force and effect, repeals and replaces the National Key Points Act of 1980. Any national key point or national key point complex declared under the National Key Point Act must be deemed to be a critical infrastructure until the Minister of Police has decided whether to declare it as critical infrastructure or not. The Act establishes a Critical Infrastructure Council whose responsibilities include considering and making recommendations in respect of applications to be designated as critical infrastructure, approving various guidelines, and reporting to the Minister of Police. The only problem we have is whether South African Police Services has the capacity to be able to implement any recommendation. A person in control of infrastructure can apply to have such infrastructure designated as critical infrastructure. Once designated as critical infrastructure, the owner thereof is required to, amongst others, secure the critical infrastructure. Now, we know, Chairperson, what has happened, particularly to Parliament and the threats. I see we talk a lot about terrorism, but I think we have greater internal threats in the country. Furthermore, any person who commits an offense in terms of the Act is liable to conviction, for fine, and an imprisonment. Honorable Chairperson, the National Freedom Party notes and welcomes the work that has been done by the Portfolio Committee and recommends that the amendment be supported. Thank you.
The AIC, COPE, PAC, Al-Jama, the ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. The ANC welcomed the draft regulation of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act of 2019. The Portfolio Committee has at its meeting held on the 31st of August considered the draft regulation of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act of 2019, Act number 8 of 2019, and make its submission on this draft regulation. This regulation deals, among others, the functioning and the procedure to be followed by the Critical Infrastructure Council. Honorable members, you would remember that the report on the processes on the appointment of the Critical Infrastructure Council was tabled before the House by the Portfolio Committee on Police, and it was considered. The Portfolio Committee has followed all the processes and the requirement on the appointment of the Critical Infrastructure Council. All steps as set out in the legislation on the appointment of the Critical Infrastructure Council were followed by the Portfolio Committee on Police. The aim and objective of the draft regulation of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act of 2019 is to provide for the identification and declaration of infrastructure as critical infrastructure, and also to provide for the guidelines and factors to be taken into account to ensure transparent identification and declaration of critical infrastructure, and to provide measures to be put in place for the protection, safeguarding, resilience of infrastructure. More importantly, the guidelines provide for the establishment of Critical Infrastructure Council. In March 2022, the Minister signed off the notice of the publication of the draft regulation for the public to make its comment. This was in line with Section 27 of the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act of 2019. The ANC believe that although the identification and protection of the critical infrastructure is the sole responsibility of the Critical Infrastructure Council, it is also our responsibility as South African citizens, civil society, and government to protect our infrastructure against all forms of criminal acts. We need to work together as South Africans and all sectors, public and private, to protect this hard-earned democracy and its infrastructure. The ANC welcome and support the draft regulation of Critical Infrastructure Act of 2019 and recommend to the House that the report should be considered. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you. Honorable members, are there any objection to the approval of draft regulation of Critical Infrastructure Protection Act 2019 as it appears on the order paper? No objections, agreed to. I will now allow the secretary to read the fifth order.
Debate on Heritage Day, celebrating the legacy of Solomon Linda and South Africa's indigenous music.
Thokoze ngizobiza manje ungqongqoshe wezemidlalo, ubuhabo namasiko. Umhlonishwa Mthethwa Nyambozi.
Kwezobuhlanga, namasiko. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Let me greet you and the members of this august body, the Deputy Minister in the House, ministers who are on different virtual platforms, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Usomlomo uthe asihlangane namhlanje sizofakana imilomo ngodaba olubaluleke kakhulu lwamagugu. Ngifuna ke ukuthi mangiqala ngithi ngiyambonga uSotswebhu umbutho olawula lelizwe okwazile ukuthi lolu daba aliphakamela alisukumele ebiza wonke amalungu eParliament ukuthi awatshengise ukuthi isikhathi inyanga ebalekile nosuku olubalekile. Usuku ke lolu oluhlanganisa zonke izizwe zaseNingizimu Afrika phansi kwezamagugu. Kodwa ke kufanele sikhumbule ukuthi umthetho walo wakade kuusuku kadlungwane kaNdaba. Udlungwane ombelebele odlunga emanxulumeni kwaze kwasamanxulume sibekela isishaka kasishayeki lodume ehlezi kamenzi. Yayikade isuke lapho le ndaba. Namhlanje ke sithi isiqubulo sale nyanga sithi sijabulela okwashiwa ukhondo lolashiwa uSolomon Linda nomculo ke womdabu. Balekile ke ukuthi sicacise lento ukuthi lensizwa le yashona eminyakeni engamashumi edlule. Namhlanje iminyaka engamashumi neinsuku eziyishumi yadlula emhlabeni lensizwa. Yathi ke lensizwa idlule emhlabeni yayisiqophe okuningi, yaqopha umculo wembube istathamie yawubiza ukuthi imbube. Lo mculo ke lona leli culo lakhe lasebenza kakhulu, sasebenza namanje abantu abaningi bayahlomula ngalo. Lathi mase liqhubeka balithi phecelezi Lion Sleeps Tonight. Namhlanje abantu basahlomula kodwa uLinda nezizukulwane zakhe abahlomuli ngalokho. Bambambele ekhoneni bathi bamnikeza u10 shilling ngaleso sikhathi. Kwaba yona into abamnikeza yona. Kodwa namhlanje basathola amamiliyoni amadola ngomculo kaLinda. Sithi ke namhlanje impilo kaLinda ifana nayabaculi abaningi abadlule kuloko. Kodwa ke njengohulumeni okhona njengamanje ufuna ukusho la ukuthi le ndawo akhulela kuyona eMsinga idolobha belibiza ngePomeroy. Namhlanje leli dolobha seliuSolomon Linda akuseyona iPomeroy. To avoid the experience of Solomon Linda and many others, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, supported by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, have over the past few years campaigned for the passing of the Copyright Amendment Bill and Performance Protection Bill. We are grateful to this House, the National Assembly, that this bill has been passed and sent to NCOP for concurrence. The two bills are aimed at promoting the economic interest of content creators, whilst at the same time accommodating the need to reasonable access to information by users. This is in line with the latest and changing technology. For the first time in the history of our copyright system, our law introduces resale rights for visual artwork, thus ensuring that the artists and or families receive compensation each time the work is resold on the market. They also provide an adequate mechanism for collection and distribution of royalties. Through the Copyright Tribunal, the bills make provision for an improved and effective dispute resolution mechanism, and this will benefit many artists who cannot afford exorbitant amounts charged through the traditional litigation process. During the period of the pandemic, as a caring government, this government helped 59,224 beneficiaries, contrary to the popular peddling of lies. And this is the number which benefited and secured 38,558 jobs for job retention and creation. The amount spent during this period is 808 million rands, which benefited the creatives. This is the money which went into the pockets of athletes, of creatives, and their entities. Over the period, the financial years of 2019 to 2022, 38 beneficiaries were supported in their international adventures, resulting in 1,200 job opportunities. On public arts program, 51 beneficiaries were supported, resulting in 451 job opportunities. The Art Bank program of the department ensured that 316 creatives or 505 artworks from artists benefiting 316 creatives. The Artists in Schools program, 635 arts practitioners were placed in 602 schools in all the 9 provinces. On the community arts centers, all 9 provinces received support to implement community arts development program. 116 community arts centers were supported to implement the programs. On academies, 6 beneficiaries, resulting in 221 job opportunities. On visual arts, since 2013, we have taken 13 visual artists to Venice Art Biennale, a gathering popularly known as the Olympics of the art world. This is the highest level of art competition globally, and we have supported our creatives who ranked with the best in the world. Currently, we have just completed a competition entered into by 300 schools all over the country. 10 of the best in these 300 schools of arts will join the world in Venice soon. On audiovisual, the department has partnered with the National Film and Video Foundation on 10 documentaries documenting stories of history, legacy, heritage, culture, and liberation of South Africa. On design, Chairperson, in line with the Freedom Charter, which enjoins us that, and I quote, the government shall discover, develop, and encourage national talent for the enhancement of our cultural life. In line with this, the following designers debuted at the Emerging Creative Platform of the department. The Emerging Creative Platform is done by the department in partnership with the International Design Indaba. This platform has nurtured over 500 designers in all the different design disciplines. We kickstarted the careers of these designers, and today they are amongst the best in the world. Ladumang Mongolo, also known as Makosa, who exhibited in this platform of the department in 2013. Amongst others, he was named as one of the Vogue's top 10 designers in Africa. He exports all over the world. Tebe Makuku, he exhibited in our platform in 2016. Tebe's knack of retelling the stories of his hometown and South Africa's history made him the first African to win the prestigious Louis Vuitton Prize in 2019 and British Fashion Council International Showcase for curation and fashion content, amongst others. Rich Mnisi exhibited in our program in 2015. He was named the Vogue's top 10 designer in Africa. He exports his work all over the world with the likes of Naomi Campbell and Beyonce wearing his signature bold garments that fuse contemporary pop culture and traditional African heritage. Catherine Petuli, she is accessories designer who exhibited at our platform in the Emerging Creative in 2013. Her quintessential jewelry is stocked in boutiques, jewelries all over the world. She has been growing not only in reach. Her clients include Solange, Knowles, and Meghan Markle. And her accessories range is also stacked on the shelves of Bloomingdale's in New York. There are many others, Sianda Mpele and others. Now, I want to say, Chair, that in helping women, specifically on the program of women, women in KwaZulu-Natal came together under their outfit, Igoda Fashion, and they deal with fashion. And this fashion is about our own heritage, about our own culture. And they've been able to ensure their presence in Gauteng, in Sandton, Mall of Africa and Mendin, and all of these are Edgar stores. In KZN Pavilion Mall and Gateway Mall, on November, they will be opening a new store in Canal Walk, just a few kilometers from the house here. Now, what we have done, Chair, is to ensure that we now concentrate on economic recovery and reconstruction plan. And one of the programs which we ensured that it doesn't die is District 6 Museum. We have revived it because it carries our culture. It carries the resistance, heritage and culture, and it couldn't die. We've also, for the youth, opened the South African Hip Hop Museum. And these are South African youth who have to be known all over the world. Chairperson, I want to say that in enhancement of the arts, culture, heritage, and sport tourism, the focus of this priority area is the utilization of heritage sites to create jobs whilst improving visitor experience through developing exhibitions in line with the draft agreement that will be signed with the Department of Tourism. And it has happened, Chair, that our forebears, the Solomon Lindas of this world, having identified our own kind of genre and exported it in the world respected us. Today, one of the outfits, Lady Smith Dek Mambazo, continues on that path. They have won 5 Grammy Awards, and tell me any other who has won that. The world is only going to respect you if you respect yourself and you know who you are and be able to showcase who you are. It didn't end up with them. The youth of today introduced in this country a genre called Kwaito. Today, what is sought after in the world are Amapiano, and that is South Africa. Now, we have to ensure that we stick by what we have and be able to be respected, we will be respected by doing what is ours and own our craft as South Africa and own our heritage. This is our heritage, our pride, our culture. Thank you very much.
Sithokoze mhlonishwa. Ngizomukela manje umhlonishwa Joseph.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, honorable members, the public. In today's debate, we will reflect on Solomon Linde, the South African musician, singer, and composer, also known as Solomon Nsele, as well as South African indigenous music. Solomon was born in KZN 1909 under British rule and died in October 1962 during the years of apartheid. In our democratic government, we have the opportunity to honor Solomon Linde and many musicians and songwriters and artists who form part of our heritage collection. One of the songs, originally in Zulu, composed by Solomon Linde in 1939 under the title Mbube, was in 2004 with the support of the South African government and Gallo Records acknowledged in The Lion King, that we know today as The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Chairperson, the message of and the lesson of The Lion's King reminds us of the blinding efforts of power and those who will do anything to be in control. Dr. Ruben Richards, in his book, Hottentot Hospitality, writes about the abuse of power and the control dated back to the 14th century, when the Portuguese settlers attempted to colonize the Cape and African shores and were defeated in Salt River by the local Khoi leaders. They settled in what we know today and call today as East Mozambique and Angola. The Dutch and British arrived in the African shores in 1652 with a strategy to be nice to the indigenous people and gather intelligence. The plan was dispossession, to take their land of the indigenous people, to take control of their culture, to take their people away, to take their beliefs, their cultural objects, social life, spiritual life, inheritance away. This is what Dr. Ruben Richards described as the abuse of hospitality in his book. This abuse continued under apartheid government and is still happening today under the ANC government. The ANC is abusing the hospitality of South Africans and of the Khoisan people. The Act 3 of 2019, my apology, the Act 3 of 2019 is a recognition of Khoisan, and this recognition is only on paper. One example is Sarah Bartman Memorial Center in the Hankey Valley. This is, of course, very important for the Khoisan. She was buried with human dignity on 9th August 2002. However, the Memorial Center was launched in 2014. The cost escalated to nearly 200 million rand, but the Memorial Center is still incomplete, which is an insult to the Khoisan people. Onze Kaap Malay kore, Kersfees band kore, Kaapse minstrels, die Occupational kore, gemeenskapskore, feeste in Suid-Afrika, oral waar die musiek en die kunstenaars en sosiale cohesie en nasie bevorder, dis 'n boodskap van hoop en namens die parlement en demokratiese alliansie sê ons dankie aan almal. Music is and remains part of our cultural heritage. Musiek is deel van ons kom vandaan. Die departement van sport, kuns en kultuur kan 'n groter bydrae maak om kwessies soos jeugontwikkeling, armoede, werkloosheid, ongelykheid en transformasie aan te spreek. Die regering moet die departement op 'n hoër prioriteitslys plaas. Indigenous music come from indigenous people, indigenous history, indigenous tribes, indigenous songs with indigenous instruments. Every tribe, culture and language in South Africa contributes to our diverse society. Die DA versoek dat alle kultuurkuns en kunskultuurvakke weer in die skole ingestel moet word en dit sal bydra om 'n voorbeeld te wees vir Solomon Linde se voorbeeld. Ek dank u.
Sizomukela ilunga elihloniphekileko lendlu, umhlonishwa Madlingozi.
Chairperson, inyan maithetho izinyanya zisakhala namhlanje. Chairperson, the story of Solomon Linda is such a typical African story because at the core, it represents Western accumulation of wealth by dispossessing African people of theirs. In essence, there is a direct correlation between the development of the West and the underdevelopment of Africa. One feeds off the other. One is responsible for the other. The same logic defines the so-called inequalities in this country. The comfort and privileges that European settlers enjoy in this country are linked and are responsible for the poverty, landless, and dehumanization of native peoples of this land. Our celebration of heritage must be understood from this context, that European settlers came, killed, raped, dispossessed, and appropriated items of value that belong to Africans to themselves, leaving Africans destitute. Solomon Popoli Linda was born in 1909 and passed away in 1962. In his short life, he was an accomplished musician whose potential was held back by the racist, colonial, and apartheid regimes. He moved from KZN to Johannesburg in the 1930s, where his music career blossomed. He started a music group called Solomon Linda and the Music Birds, and produced politically charged songs such as Petuli, Take Off Your Hat, and Sikalela Izwe Lakit, We Mourn for Our Country. His most popular song, however, Mbube, which was so popular that by 1949, it has sold over 100,000 copies in this country, cementing Linda's position as an elite musician in this country. The worst disdainful regard for African property, particularly African intellectual property, would not leave Linda be. In 1952, Pete Seeger of the group called the Weavers in the United States stole the original version of Mbube and adopted it to be a song called Wimo Way. And then later on, when the song became very popular in the US, it was rewritten as The Lion Sleeps Tonight by George Wise. The song has since been recorded by over 150 artists across the world and has featured in films, the most known of which is The Lion King. In all these productions of the song, Solomon Linda did not get any recognition. While whites grew popular and rich because of his production, he grew poorer and more destitute, dying in absolute poverty in 1962 without ever getting royalties for his work. It was only in 2004 that Linda's surviving daughters began a lawsuit that would eventually see them getting royalties of their father's work. The sad story of the theft of Linda's work is not dissimilar to the theft of African land by the marauding invaders who have now settled on this land. They own the land, the banks, the minerals, and even stolen much of Africa's intellectual property for their own benefit. Africans are living in poverty, worked as slaves in the farms now owned by the settlers, which previously belonged to their forefathers. Whatever notions of heritage we are meant to celebrate this month remains meaningless unless and until Africans get back all that was stolen from them by the white people. White people must realize that for as long as they hold on to their illegitimately acquired wealth and comfort while African people are destitute, there is no prospect of peaceful coexistence in this country. The media and information houses they control will not stop the coming revolution, nor will the Uncle Toms they pay with crumbs in the ANC will stop it. African people will reclaim their heritage. They will reclaim their land by whatever means necessary. And when that happens, white settlers would wish they had taken the post-1994 opportunity to make amends for their destructive racism. Jabulela.
Siyabulela, Mhlonishwa. Akulandelayo asimeme umhlonishwa Uhlengwa. Thank you. Order. Mhlonishwa Hlengwa.
Ngiyathokoza kakhulu sihlalo. Egameni leqembu lenkatha yenkululeko yesizwe ngisho ukuthi siyakholelwa ekutheni kufanele ukuba siqhubeke nokuthungatha labo ababenomnikelo abangasabalwa emlandweni, ikakhulukazi uma sicabanga ngengqikithi yalonyaka kule nkulumompikiswano ukugubha ifagugu likaSolomon Linda kanye nomculo wendabuko waseNingizimu Afrika. Ziningi izigomagoma zomkhakha wamasiko okuyimvela kancane ukukhunjula kwazo emphakathini obanzi njengowaseNingizimu Afrika. Nakuba kungenzeka ukuthi uSolomon Linda wadlula emhlabeni engabekwanga endaweni yakhe emfanele yokuhlonishwa njengoba kwenzeka kulabo abephila ngesikhathi sakhe, isisindo somnikelo wakhe siseyinto emqoka ngisho nakulesi sikhathi esiphila kuso. Izingcwabo nomsuka womculo wembube yinto esuselwa mva nje kweminyaka yawo-1920 kule ndawo esiyaziwa namhlanje ukuthi KwaZulu Natal. Ngenkathi sekuqala umbhidlango wokusebenza kwemishini ukwandisa imikhiqizo kanye nezimayini zamalahle namafemu. Njengoba iningi leniqonda boza kwethu liqonda ukuthi umculo wembube wendlalela ezinye izinhlobo zomculo wamakwaya nesicathamia kanye nombhaqanga, uSolomon Linda uyaziswa futhi wethula isigqoko ngomsebenzi omkhulu awenzayo. Nginenkolelo Nyambose kanye nalendlu ehloniphekile ukuthi uma sikhuluma ngokumqoka balengoma ithinta ukujula kokuthi singobani singabantu, buyini ubuntu nokuthi buyini ubuAfrika. Lezo zinto asingagcini nje ngokuyicula kodwa siyiphile. Sibuke esikhathini samanje ukuthi ziwumthandazo okhuluma nokhokho ukuze kuphile unembeza wesizwe. Ndikufanele sikhathazeke kakhulu mase sibona umbhidlango wodlame olubhekiswe abesifazane nezingane, ubuka ubelelesi nobugebengu, ubuka indlela esentshontshwa ngayo nemali yomphakathi efanele ingabe ifeza izidingo zokuletha intuthuko nezingqalasizinda nezinsiza kusebenza emphakathini yakithi. Ngakho umsebenzi wamaciko akukona nje ukujabula kuphela, kodwa ukukhulumisana nesizwe ukuthi sibuyele emzileni wokuphila nokwakha iNingizimu Afrika enenqubekela phambili egameni labantu baseNingizimu Afrika. Yiko into edinga ukuthi kufanele nezemfundo zaseNingizimu Afrika zikuthinte ukuthi kuyini ubuAfrika, zikuthinte ukuthi buyini ubuntu ukuze singalahlekelwa unembeza, singalahlekelwa futhi ukuthini. Ngakho-ke ubaluleke kakhulu umsebenzi ukukhumbula izigomagoma zaseNingizimu Afrika ebesezikhohliwe nezinye zazo esingazazi, sikwenza kube umsebenzi wethu kuyoyifuna ukuze ziphile noma sezingasekho phakathi kwethu. Kubalulekile ukuthi njengoba sigubha lenyanga yamagugu siphinde siyibheke ukuthi ngabe izinto ezazenziwa siziyekelile. Ngoba enye into esibulalayo ukuthi sesiyeke indlela zethu sathatha indlela zabanye abantu. Uma ubuka indlela ohambe ngawo umsebenzi wokufihlwa kwendlovukazi yamangisi, uyabona ukuthi abaziyekile izinto zabo nezingamasiko abo. Ngakho-ke nathi njengabantu base-Afrika, abantu baseNingizimu Afrika ikakhulu, ebubanzini bokwehlukana kwethu namasiko ahlukene nendlela zokuphila ezahlukene, kufanele siyifune izinto ezisihlanganisayo ukuze sikwazi ukuthi izwe lakithi siyiphilise. Siyophiliswa ubunye, siyophiliswa ukubambana nokwakha uxolo nokuqinisekisa ukuthi siyathembeka kuloko kokho. Ngiyathokoza kakhulu sihlalo.
Sithokoze mhla. Ilunga elihloniphekileko lendlu, umhlonishwa Dena.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. House Chair, Heritage Day on the 24th of September recognizes and celebrates the cultural wealth of our nation. South Africans celebrate the day by remembering the cultural heritage of the many cultures that make up the population of South Africa. This is the definition of Heritage Day on the government's website. It paints a pretty picture of promotion by government of mutual respect and acceptance in the celebration of the heritage of all our South African cultures. But just like the ugly truth behind The Lion Sleeps Tonight, in reality, this picture is far from pretty. Our cultural heritage is no longer ours, nor is it safe where government involves itself. For where government involves itself in cultural heritage, it becomes a political plaything that is shamelessly used and abused to promote failed ANC ideology. And I will not even dignify the EFF statement here today with a response. Chairperson, who can forget the 100-meter flagpole that was punted by the Minister for Sport, Arts and Culture with such enthusiasm that he seemingly forgot that South Africans who have suffered even more during the COVID-19 pandemic are going hungry, while he wants to spend millions on a white elephant in the name of cultural heritage. Luckily, we as citizens succeeded in reminding him of that. Or the fact that the very same minister lobbied to change the name of the Afrikaans language monument to make it inclusive of other language speakers. Let me repeat that. He wanted to change the name of a monument erected for a specific language to include other languages. Here's an idea, Honourable Minister. If you want to celebrate and commemorate different languages, which would be excellent, by the way, then build different monuments. Die jag wat deur die ANC-regering op Afrikaner erfenis gemaak word, weerspreek ook hierdie rooskleurige prentjie wat deur die regering geskets word. Soos 'n slang, agbare huisvoorsitter, praat hierdie regering met 'n gesplete tong. Want hoe kan ons erfenisdag vier, waar alle kulture waaruit die Suid-Afrikaanse samelewing bestaan, se erfenis gevier moet word, terwyl die departement wat verantwoordelik is vir die bewaring van kulturele erfenis aktief sekere kulture se erfenis as boos uitkry, marginaliseer, verstoot en verag. Die staat behoort nie aktief betrokke te wees by kulturele erfenis nie, maar moet eerder onafhanklike organisasies wat hulself vir die voortgesette bewaring en bevordering van kulturele erfenis beywer befonds. En sodanige fondse moet behoorlik bestuur word. Anders as wat tans die geval is met talle voorbeelde, soos onder meer die Nasionale Kunsteraad, Pakhofs en die meer onlangse Mzansi Filharmoniese Orkees, waaroor ons nog baie gaan lees. House Chair, part of the theme for today's debate is celebrating the legacy of Solomon Linda. I must admit, I did not know who Solomon Linda was prior to doing research for today's topic. I learned that his famous song, Mbube, was in fact hijacked by an American band and recorded as what we all know today as The Lion Sleeps Tonight, and of which Linda and his family only received about $1,000 in royalty. It is a sad and ironic truth that the ANC government has hijacked our cultural heritage in the same way to exploit it for their own political gain. House Chair, I thank you.
Motlhomphegi Sukere se sebaka ke sa gago.
Eerbare voorsitter, ons grootste geskenk.
Order, honorable member. Wag 'n bietjie. Kan ons luister asseblief? Gaan voort, ja.
Ons grootste geskenk aan die nageslag is die behoudenis van ons ryk erfenis in taal en musiek. In 'n wêreld van konstante verandering is ons vir die afgelope 10 dae betower deur die magiese krag en ryk simbole van die Verenigde Koninkryk tydens die periode van rou vir die oorlede monarg Elizabeth II. Politiek verdeel, kultuur, taal en musiek bind mense saam in 'n unieke, tog diverse identiteit as een nasie. Wie ons is as mense word ontwikkel deur die plekke van ons herkoms, die hartsplekke van ons siel, wat vervat word in die mooiheid van taal en klank, getoonset op musiek, eie aan die verskillende streke van hierdie mooi land. Die blymaakklanke van Pinkster, of die diep mystiek van die tromboom, eie aan ons kontinent Afrika. Elke streek en provinsie in ons hartland Suid-Afrika het sy eie unieke identiteit en dit word vervat in die musiek en liedere wat geskryf word. Vandag in die portefeulje komitee van onderwys het die visieminister ons aandag gevestig daarop dat musiek nog steeds deel uitmaak van die skoolkurrikulum. Die ACDP wil vra, waar en hoeveel skole in ons kwintil 1 tot 3 skole bied nog musiek aan in hierdie land? Meer as 3000 plaaskole in ons landelike gebiede staar toemaak in die gesig. Solomon Popoli Linda was die produk van so 'n skool, landelik, aards en ryk in geskiedenis. Elke verwaarloosde en leë skool in die platteland is 'n stukkie geskiedenis wat verlore gaan. Ons land word verarm en die ryk erfenis van landelike skole om die siel van 'n nasie te restoreer en bewaar word weggegooi. Baie van hierdie skole is meer as 100 jaar oud en staan as museums vir die ryk geskiedenis van ons streke. 'n Generasie van kinders word ontwortel en hulle identiteit as mense sal geaffekteer word in die langtermyn. Hierdie huis moet optree om ons landelike skole en gemeenskappe te bewaar van bureaukratiese vergryping wat geïmplementeer word sonder enige navorsing. In die woorde van een van ons moderne Afrikaanse liedjies wil ons vandag sê, stop die lorry, minister Motshega, moenie ons landelike skole toemaak nie. Baie dankie.
UDM, ATM, Mhlomphehi van Dijk,
Agbare voorsitter, lede van die huis. Vanjaar se erfenismaand tema bring hulde aan die 60ste herdenking van die dood van sanger en liedjieskrywer Solomon Linda, as ook aan Suid-Afrikaanse inheemse musiek. Erfenisdag op 24 September staan ook in Suid-Afrika as Braaidag bekend. Hierdie jaar sal baie mense egter in die tuispryse karretjie ry en 'n droom van 'n braaichoppie, want brandstof en voedselpryse in Suid-Afrika is buite beheer. Dit is die erfenis wat die ANC laat. Suid-Afrika is 'n land ryk aan kultuur en taal. Al swyg die taalraad oor die inheemse status van Afrikaans en die Khoi en San tale tydens 'n openbare dispuut, en selfs toe dit moes erken dat die Afrikaanse taalmonumente plek in die erfenis van Suid-Afrika het. Niks bring mense in Suid-Afrika egter bymekaar soos die krag van musiek nie. Suid-Afrika geniet verskeidenheid groepe wat almal unieke en ingewikkelde musiekklanke het. Jy kan jou dus verlekker aan nostalgiese en legendariese liedjies wat 'n groot deel van die Suid-Afrikaanse kultuur geword het, soos Pata Pata van Miriam Makeba, Jabulani deur PJ Powers, Vicky Sampson se African Dream, Mango Groove se Special Star of Johnny Clegg en Jeluka se Scatterings of Africa, of net lekker boere musiek, klassieke Afrika musiek, jazz en verwante township musiekstyle. Lewende erfenis bevorder kulturele diversiteit, sosiale kohesie, versoening, vrede en ekonomiese ontwikkeling en is 'n noodsaaklike bron van identiteit en kontinuïteit. Die waardevolle maar verwaarloosde kulturele erfenis wat in inheemse musiek bestaan, moet egter dringend bewaar word. Die Suider-Afrikaanse Musiekregte Organisasie het die inheemse musiekprojek gestig wat fokus op die transkribering en dokumentasie van inheemse Afrika musiek vir eindes van navorsing, bewaring, uitvoering sowel as bevordering van Suid-Afrika se ryk musiekerfenis. Maar musiek wat uitgevoer word op inheemse instrumente soos die uhari, umakonyana, sitende en mibala, tradisionele musiek vir kulturele deurgangsrites, soos troues en begrafnisse en selfs kinderliedjies, loop gevaar om saam met sommige van die beoefenaars van hierdie unieke klanke uit te sterf. Inheemse musiek behoort in die kurrikulum van skole opgeneem te word. Daar is ook 'n leemte in die navorsing van inheemse musiek om musikale diversiteit te herontdek en uit te bou. Solomon Linda is 'n Suid-Afrikaans gebore musikant van KwaZulu-Natal en bekende komponis van die liedjie Mbube, wat later die gewilde musieksukses The Lion Sleeps Tonight geword het. Sommige van sy musiek kan geïnterpreteer word as 'n uitdrukking van politieke oneenigheid. Haal jou hoed af, wat herinner aan die behandeling deur paskantoorbeamptes, eindig met die woorde Sikalele Ishwelakiti. Ons huil vir ons land. Ons huil ook vir ons land. Ons huil oor staatskaping, kaderontplooiing en korrupsie,
oor 'n minister van sport, kuns en kultuur wat 'n 22 miljoen rand vlagpaal prioriseer, terwyl duisende musikante en kunstenaars nog die impak van COVID ervaar. 'n Minister en kunsteraad wat nie deursigtige prosesse volg wanneer 'n nasionale simfonieorkes gestig word en 'n handjievol kaders hulle dik vreet aan belastingbetaler geld, terwyl arm huishoudings wonder waar die volgende bord kos vandaan kom. Die land se konstante daling op die ranglys vir ekonomiese vryheid word reflekteer in die lewenskwaliteit afname maatstawwe wat deur die meeste Suid-Afrikaners ervaar word. Die resultaat van die regering se gekose ideologiese beleidsposisies. Die ANC-regering moet dringend die buitensporige belasting en heffings op brandstof stry om die prys van brandstof, voedsel en lewenskoste te verlaag. Op Erfenisdag erken en vier ons die kulturele rykdom en diversiteit van ons nasie. Ons besef in die woorde van Audre Lorde, dit is nie ons verskille wat ons verdeel nie, maar ons onvermoë om die verskille te erken, te aanvaar en te vier. Die kompromie in ons land
Ongelukkig, u se tyd is
reflekteer
nou
egter
om.
ons kulture en musikale
Mevrou
voorsiening.
van Dijk.
Kosi Sikelena, Kotse in Afrika.
A re amogeleng kolobe ya Beatladi. Motlhomphegi Mamabolo.
Ya mamorela. Ya leboga mo Julius Tilo Meborod. Ke thome ka go tšea sebaka se ke leboga mokgatlho wa ka o mogologolo wa modimo le badimo wa African National Congress. Ka sebaka se ba re fileng sona se a se tle easy re leboga kudu ka matla. Julius Tilo Meborotho bjalo ka karolo ya go keteka kgwedi ya rena ya bokgwa e. Re ile ra tsamaya ra attenda moletlo mongwe o bitswa gore ke Polokwane Social Derby, ba re ke PSD kwa Polokwane. Ke moletlo o renye ke hype of activities, re kwa ka talente ya rena ya local kwa re dutse le bo DJ Scotch, bo DJ Bambo, bo DJ Phoenix, ga mmogo le bo DJ King Bash. Ka gobane ke meletlo e renye rena re le baetapele ba local ra e attenda gore re kgone gore talente ye e tswele pele. E ska fela fase thome fase e ye godimo gore le ka moso le bona batho ba le ba kgono ya pele ba tshwana le ba bangwe. Gana kua e be e bile re beletše le kgwele ya maoto kua re bona bo Mararas FC ya Chenene Makhura ba intšha e sa le forogo ka baka la se kgone e le mošwatla. Re lebogiše gape ba di-champion tša ngwago e le go Lions of Limpopo ya Mtate Lord Ramusu, even though ba re o tsamaile a reka referee but a re tshepe jwalo. Ntate Mathelo yana re next time Citizen Brothers eta win. Honorable Minister, events like this needs to be supported by government so that they can grow and grow bigger than your Durban July, your Makufe, and also Cape Town Jazz Festival. Because these are local ideas and every small idea needs to be nurtured and be supported. Because Honorable Minister, it was the idea of Solomon Linda and his story that one of experience is available on the complexity of squid power relations in the industry. From the early 1950s, the artistic genius of Africans has been exploited and not adequately rewarded by those who have focused on saving their own interest instead of providing a platform for authentic artistic expression to thrive. It is through the case of Solomon Linda that we are able to see how apartheid legacy impacted on the artistic heritage of South Africans and how it has hindered economic progress of both the country or also on his personal life. Many talented South Africans, Minister, have suffered over the past years in the hands of exploitation, recording houses, and also our leaders in the music industry, not only abroad, honorable members, but producer music, but Honorable Chairperson, transforming the record label industry and protecting the copyright of artists and expanding copyright education to all emerging indigenous artists. Already, Papadi Muhammad Africa has been given a mandate to provide leadership to this sector to accelerate its transformation, overseeing its development and also management. In South Africa today, Honorable Chairperson, the indigenous music industry is quite vast and exists beyond artists that are mainly recognized in the genre of the mainstream industry. South Africa is a country that is echoed in the rich history and culture of music that finds expression across the length and breadth of the world. Honorable Chairperson, ile rabona kosha ya Jerusalem yela ya Master KG ga mo lomqebo e chikintsha lefase e tsamaya batho ka moka ke ge ba thoma go tsenela ntho ba re ke Jerusalem challenge ga ke tsebe gore nna ba bangwe ga na montse ba e kgona nana ke a tseba gore ntse ke shaloto ka o left e ka o right o no pala go le bothata a ke shoka chief whip gore na yena o be a e kgona na ka moka e be re palela but ye ile ya thusha gore ka moka batho di artist Africa borwa di kgone ba recognized ka moraga fa o ile ra bona batho ba tsona le bo Black Coffee bo King Monata bo Benny Mayengane ka magolo pressure tsa manyalo batho ba go chicken fase because ile ya thoma ka tabela ya Jerusalem. Honorable Minister, this long Honorable Minister, Honorable Chairperson, the song of Imbuwe, Umbuwe, Imbuwe, Imbuwe was arguably one of the most lucrative melodies that to date continues to make profit through the was arguably one of the most lucrative melodies that to date continues to make profit through the Walt Disney's film theater and also the Lion King. It is, however, unfortunate that the proceeds of the song have not adequately served the descendants of Solomon Linda. The politics of royalties and wealth accumulated through arts, especially in South Africa context, should include a discussion about the importance of education, financial literacy for emerging national artists. But ba di artists ba ithute go bea tšhelete ka gobane bontši wa bona ge ba tlhokofetše e ba mathata fela santse go be le financial literacy go ba botša gore no ge o sa phela tšhelete ya gago e tšee o e beye gore e kgone go tlo gola bana ba gago ditlogolo khukhu bjalo le bjalo because music o tshwana le soccer ke short career o ka se bee tšhelete o tlo feleletša o thoma go losa dintlo o losa dikoloi batho ba re a wa šule yena o wele o dikile a opela mo pele ga rena a ketile yena ke tile motho yalo financial literacy is very, very important, honorable members. Ke tla fetša ka gore re le kgoro ya dipapadi bogabo le setšo re ikemišeditše go thekga di-artist ka moka mono Afrika Borwa gore go tloga go emerging artists e sa le monyane a gole a tshwana le Makazi a tshwana le King Monada a kgone go ema ke tla tšea sebaka se ka go feleletša ka go lebogiša Athama Fokate ge a be a tshwara mengwaga e 60 kgwedi ya go feta o ile ka 1994 a tla ka koši ya Kaffer a don't call me Kaffer koša ela ile ya kgatlampana mo Afrika Borwa re tseba re sa le ba banyane e be e thuša go lwantsha democracy ke tšea sebaka se gape le gore a moya wa King ola ke rena wa TKZ Tokollo Magesh Shabalala e Magesh a bone ko thusetsana o re ba le ka khutšo ke yena wa TKZ ke a leboga bana.
Re a leboga Kolobi. Okay. Order. Mhlomphegi. Shaky Imam. Order, honorable members. Shaky Imam
Thank you.
is on the virtual platform, sorry. Honorable
Thank you.
Sheikh.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Allow me, Chairperson, to pay tribute to the culture of various societies in South Africa, not limited to any one particular culture. And when we celebrate this particular cultural heritage, we need to remember the different cultures that we have in South Africa to come together, which we refer to as the Rainbow Nation. Having said that, I want to reiterate, we must not forget the indigenous people, the Khoi and San community, who have been the first indigenous nation of this country, and to a very large extent are exploited, perhaps because of the division amongst them. But remember that at some stage, people will come together and claim what is rightfully theirs. On the issue, I want to pay tribute to Solomon Popoli Linda, who was born in 1909, and I must agree with and concur with one of my colleagues. I've never known the name Solomon Linda until, of course, I had to participate in this particular debate. But having done some research on some extensive research on him, I can assure you and assure everyone in this country what a pivotal role he has played in indigenous music, particularly in this country. In 1931, Linda, like many other young African men at the time, because of his financial situation, went to Johannesburg, which was a buzzing mining community at that point in time, to find work, ended up working in the Carlton Hotel. And that's when he started performing at weddings and choir competitions and things, and then ended up with his popularity growing. Bube was a major successful lender, and I've been told that 100 or in excess of 100,000 copies were sold in 1949 alone. And in 2000, South African journalists, and I think we must also pay tribute to Rian Malan, who identified Solomon Linda and took him on his wing. And in fact, if you read what Rian Malan says, that in 2000, he wrote a feature article for the magazine Rolling Stone describing Linda's story and estimating that the song had earned in excess, Chairperson, of $15 million at that time. And you can imagine what that was worth. However, it would appear that he sold it for almost next to nothing. But in 2004, and I think this is where the South African government, let us welcome the decision that the South African government took to support Linda and decided to take on the Walt Disney Company, Gallo Records, particularly on the issue of the Lion King movie. And of course, a settlement agreement was reached. But I think what is very important to note that the role he played, but died with very little or nothing. We call on the
Thank you.
department to give greater protection to artists in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Mhlomphehi Jafta, sebaka ke sa lena.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The life and legacy of Solomon Linda, who was a South African musician, singer, and composer, represents the pulse of our creative spirit. In celebrating this year's Heritage Day, we honor and celebrate our indigenous music. Solomon Linda's classic Mbube resonated with the world in no small measure. Other indigenous music trailblazers like Makatini, Joe Mafela, Jabu Kanyile, and a host of others flew our indigenous musical fleet high on the global stage. We cannot complete this Heritage Month without recognizing the role of indigenous artists. Honorable Chair, in order to appreciate the reach of this debate, we must place the role of indigenous music within the liberation tapestry of this country. The doyens of our liberation used our indigenous music to push back the frontiers of oppression with the likes of Solomon Linda popularizing isicathamiya and embedding indigenous consciousness in minds of our people. For the liberation of our people required their Black consciousness. Honorable Chair, as we celebrate our heritage in style, we cannot but honor our indigenous music giants who kept the fires burning during the most difficult era of our struggle. I thank you.
Ra leboga Mhlomphehi Cope. Mhlomphehi Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. The Al Jamaa Party welcomes the renaming of Solomon Linda's hometown, Poneroy, after him. It is encouraging to know that government is taking steps to get rid of colonial names, and we're happy for the Solomon Linda community. They will have a good cause to celebrate Heritage Day. But sadly, Honorable House Chair, this will not be in the case of El Dorado Park, Riverlee, Freedom Park, and the Cape Flat communities who are struggling to eradicate their places of living from crime, gangsterism, drugs, and other behaviors. The El Dorado community, young and old, are camping outside as we speak, outside the local police station in protest against government's failure to act on the legacy promise that was made 9 years ago. And this was for an intervention plan in terms of a national document, the National Drug Master Plan. And we heard the Minister of Culture earlier on speaking. He was then the Minister of Police. The Alder Park protests followed a collective response to the recent rampant increase in the gang-related shootings due to the drug war currently underway within the community. Tragically, the community of Alder Park has been burying children shot in gang violence. Yesterday I was there, and when the school closed, Honorable House Chair, children were running to their homes so that they won't be shot before they reach their kitchens. It has been a decade since a presidential intervention in 2013, a promise made by the presidency, and the idea was for them to leave a legacy behind, which we wanted to celebrate today, 9 years after that, but there has been no legacy. The presidency has let down the community of El Dorado Park, the communities of the Cape Flats, because what was going to be in El Dorado Park was going to be a pilot. So there is nothing to celebrate for the community of El Dorado Park, the Cape Flats, and other colored areas. Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Hendricks. Asimukele numbuduma. Umhlonishwa Mabhena.
Ngiyathokoza sihlalo ngilotshisa isitshaba sonke. Angithobe ngithi ngiyimbuduma uncaku masoka sokuliswe kwesobingweni. Esasina ngomana ingeselithi khathala kayingesilisazo esazoza ukweluleka umachaba. Umachaba bambe nokhulubela kwenyembezi. Owaphuma nesala siko sizululina kwabuya naso singathamba kumhlanje umntwana azakulanga imbeleweni athi mangibayisi waphendula wathi nonami ubona ngimntazinyana nje noyisa kwamlikanyana nje sokubona senzini. Umachaba indlovu enduna eyakhamba izikhotho umlomo kunani eyakhamba ichisa imizi yabantu beyokuchisa nebekhwabulinkana dicha umkhala kaqedwa. Chairperson, the DA sends our most sincere condolences to the people of KZN, where the carnage continues unabated. What is more sad is the fact that in this time of grief and great distress, the people of Opongolo are on their own, while their so-called government leaders are gallivanting the world at taxpayers' expense. In fact, that ANC tweetist and poor excuse of a minister boarded a flight on a business class ticket, and guess what? He is tweeting live from Qatar. What a shame. Abasena Mashul, sis. Anyway, Chairperson, we're here. Today, this esteemed house is celebrating and recognizing a musical icon and a pioneer of the music industry. We're celebrating Mr. Solomon Petuli Ntsele Utatulinda, best known for composing the song titled Mbube, which was later sampled and reproduced as The Lion Sleeps Tonight, and has over the years been performed by various artists, gaining popularity across the globe in the process. Chairperson, while we celebrate the life and time of this icon, we ought to shine the spotlight in the music publishing and copyright regime at the time. Most of our coins were ripped off and received the wrong end of the stick, to a point where their hard work continues to be distributed worldwide, and millions of people across the globe continue to consume and enjoy this authentic South African classic and beautiful sound. But their families are not beneficiaries of this craft. To say this was a raw deal would be an understatement, a great injustice. We call on the Minister of Condolences, Orchestras, and Flags to address this great injustice and intervene and assist these families to correct these injustices. In closing, Chairperson, another elephant in the room, we have demagogues who are race-baiting and gaslighting hatred on a daily basis. These minuscule and minion organizations mushrooming everywhere are encouraging xenophobic attacks and ethnic targeting. This is to score cheap political points and ride on the agony and genuine frustrations of our countrymen. They are sending us down a tribalism path of no point of return, a one-way ticket to chaos and destruction. These charlatans will soon be stopping us in the streets and demanding that we smile a certain way to prove that we are of a certain descent and lineage. This is absurd. However, if good men and women don't do anything about it, it will be our reality soon. We run the risk of not being able to enjoy these authentic indigenous gems and beautiful sounds in some areas and parts, because one may simply be attacked merely for just listening to their favorite music, because that music is associated with a certain tribe. We have to reject this ethnic mobilization, because South African because South Africa is a constitutional democracy and we're a beautiful and diverse nation. This must never be misconstrued to suggest that we promote lawlessness. In fact, quite the opposite. If this nonsense continues unabated, we may find ourselves in the same boat that Rwanda once found itself. Mr. Linda created music that transcends through demographics and geographics and could be enjoyed by everyone. On that spirit, we say thank you to Mr. Ulinda for his craft and may his legacy continue to live on. Bayede Ngonyama.
Sithokoze. Isikhulumi sokugcina kule nkulumo mpikisano. Umama uMalumane. Ithuba ngelapho.
Ngibulise kuwe sihlalo. Ngibulise ku-Deputy Chief Whip. Ngibulise ku-Minister, not Minister of Condolences, Minister of Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. We are a minister. If they want to be ministers, the opposite side, they must go and campaign in 2024. But we believe and we know that the people of South Africa will support the African National Congress. Social transformation, social integration is an important aspect of social cohesion and nation building. Nationhood is an ongoing process of the transformation of our society from a past of division due to our history of imperialism to a future a national democratic society. Imperialism did not only extract the mineral wealth and labor through slavery. Imperialism has had a significant impact on our culture and identity. As a nation, we need to reflect on our cultural dominance and the appropriation of our culture by colonialism, which also undermined our culture and traditions. This has led to our cultural dominance of Western cultures and the exclusion of our African cultures. As a nation, we need to ask ourselves critical questions on the promotion of our diverse cultures. We need to embed our indigenous music in our cultural evolution for a nation building and social cohesion. Music is an art which is produced in a global cultural diversities. Music is a universal language which breaks all barriers of nationality, of language, of race, and gender. Through music, we communicate a message and knowledge. Therefore, music has the potential to shape society. Indigenous music is part of the identity of people and nation. Our indigenous music is not only for entertainment, but they contain a cultural identity, and our forebears have used music to convey our history from one generation to another. Values and principles which are upheld in our various traditions are mostly contained in our indigenous music. It is the pride that indigenous music has in defining who we are. It is therefore critical that all South Africans take an interest in their local indigenous music and music from diverse cultures, which defines the diversity of our nation. The legacy of Solomon Linda has demonstrated that our local music has always had this potential to be enjoyed by the world, which reflect the social capital in music. As a nation, we need to start supporting local artists who produces indigenous music as they preserve of heritage and identity. We need to buy and embrace their music, attend their concert, and to promote their music. One of the weaknesses impacting the prominence of indigenous music is the low level of inclusion of music in many of our schools, as music is a critical art of human endeavor. Music offers opportunities for growth and development for learners to take music as a career which has numerous social and economic benefits. We need to encourage children to play instruments at a young age and to ultimately be professional musicians, as much as we need to encourage young creative artists to produce their own music. As a country, we have produced our own music, which is appreciated and enjoyed around the world and continent. Ngiyakuvuma mfo, ngiyakuvuma. Amapiano, ayashaya amapiano. So that is why today we've got songs like Jerusalem that is enjoyed internationally. I wish I could sing Jerusalem, ikhaya lami, ngilondoloze, uhambe nami, ungangishiyi nami. Hey, those are the songs, those are the African songs that we need to make sure that we celebrate the life of Solomon Linda, has placed the need for the promotion of indigenous music for mainstream consumption, which requires music production facilities to the accessible or in the rural and urban areas, advancing and enhancing the mainstream of indigenous South African music in public platforms is a critical function which our radio and television broadcasters should promote to also create sustainable livelihoods for the artists. In his PhD studies, the status of indigenous music is the South African curriculum. Sibongile Mkhombe makes the point that indigenous music is used to recall commemoration, express peace and happiness, and motivates team spirit as it can organize activities geared towards community development. If it included in a school curriculum, it also nurtures social integration, which can enhance understanding in learning. Some songs are composed to instill socio-cultural values in establishing social relationships among the individuals and societies, also consolidate social bonds and create patriotic feelings. Music also contributes to the child's development and psychological abilities. This demonstrates the significance of music. There is an evident decline in the use of our indigenous languages. We need to teach our children the value of indigenous languages. In honoring the legacy of Solomon Linda, we need to continue to invest in our languages in education to embed our heritage for the future generations and to further develop our African cultural heritage and our heritage as a nation. Having appreciated the role that music has played in our socialization as people, the question we need to ask ourselves is the impact of music in our current context. Today, we enjoy many genres of music. Some of the music do not promote the social values, which promote some social ills that confront our society, particularly the youth. We need to encourage our creative sector artists to use their art of music to advance social change and creating awareness amongst the people. In our struggle against colonialism and apartheid, songs and music were an expression of the determination of liberate South Africa. Through songs, we highlighted the national consciousness, and through songs, we express the sorrow of the people. Songs and music have been used to polarize our society and to discriminate against others. As we commemorate Heritage Day, Honorable Van Dijk, we won't be sitting at home. We won't be sitting at home on the 24th. We'll be busy outside there celebrating heritage. I know my culture. We'll be busy singing songs, eating traditional foods in my own village. We'll be singing the songs of Ipatapata, of Umama Miriam Makeba. We'll be busy dancing. We won't be sitting home just because of the issue of price hike. We'll be celebrating this day. It needs to be celebrating. So you must go and celebrate with you. So Enoch Mankanyi Sontonga, who composed Nkosi Sikelel' Africa, which has represented the cry of the oppressed and a call for change and a call for blessing for Africa. Our national anthem is anchored on a better future for Africa because a better future of our nation is connected to that of the continent and its people. Our heritage is an African history and an African reality. We should rekindle our memory of our cause for national liberation, which was born out of the women of other African nations and its people. The people of South Africa should not embrace the right wing with thinking which defines our nation outside the pursuit of the African agenda. The people movement of the ANC is the African National Congress and not the South African National Congress because of its existence, its culmination of the struggle of the African people. Those who peddle narrative which seek to dividend Africans do not share the vision of African unity. As the African National Congress, music as an art and an expression of our culture is a key aspect of advancing social transformation and nation building. We should advance our cultural diplomatic cooperations to promote our local artists and indigenous artists who through their music, they share with the world our identity and culture. Let us take this pride and make sure that all of us seated here, we go out on the 24th of September and celebrate our culture. Singazi wena lo ngatati ukuthi uvelaphi, singakwati ukuthi udobu celebrate. But as Africans, let's make sure that we teach our children, we teach each and everyone the culture. The day of the 24th, let us not do only prize. Let's make sure that we teach one another about our culture. Where do we come from? Where do we go? And what are we do? What was the future of this cultural event? I think we need to make sure that all of us, we go and celebrate this together. And I trust and believe that Honorable Denise, that the African
Thank you
National
very
Congress
much.
is the only movement that will take the people of South Africa through. Thank you, Chair.
Malibongwe. Nakhensa bachaviseki. Sifike emaphelelweni wenkulumo phikisano. We now come to motions without notice. Any member of the ANC raise?
Chair. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable.
The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes with sadness the passing of 21 people in a horror crash on the N2 highway in northern KwaZulu-Natal on Friday, 16 September 2022. Acknowledges that a buggy carrying school children collided with a side tipper truck between Pongola and Ichele Juba. Understands that out of the 21 victims, 19 are children and 2 are adults. Further understands that the children were primary school pupils, aged between 5 and 12, who were being transported home from school. Further understands that the cause of the crash is not yet known, but is under police investigation, and conveys its condolences to the family and friends of the deceased. Siyabonga sir.
Thokoze, are there any objections to this motion? No objections agreed to. DA?
I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that the Gift of the Givers Foundation was established in 1992 by Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman as a non-governmental organization and disaster relief group to assist persons all over the world and have other humanitarian needs. Further notes that the Gift of the Givers has a passion for hunger alleviation, is committed to the provision of safe drinking water, to facilitating human development, to creating a conducive environment for education, and contributing to the health of communities, and has been involved in various other relief efforts and programs in this regard. Acknowledges that Dr. Suleiman has said over the years that his fervor for and belief in mankind motivates and energizes him and informs his passion for humanitarianism, and the reason is his faith. Recognizes that Gift of the Givers is always ready to respond quickly to disasters and to facilitate ongoing human development efforts, including the establishment of scholarships, hospitals and clinics, the creation of agricultural schemes, and the building of houses, to name but a few. Recalls that Gift of the Givers is the largest disaster response non-governmental organization of African origin on the continent. Wishes the Gift of the Givers well in the disaster relief assistance to the communities affected by the recent bursting of a dam wall in Jagersfontein and the fire in Imizamu Yetu. Congratulates Dr. Suleiman on a job done well and wishes him and the Gift of the Givers continued success in their future endeavors. I so move.
Thank you. Any objection to the motion? None agreed to. EFF?
Sibonge kakhulu, House Chair. House Chair, I rise on behalf of the economic freedom fighters to move without notice that the House notes that the Zulu nation under the leadership of the King Misuzulu Kazwelithini held its annual Umkhosi Womhlanga celebration at the Enyokeni Royal Palace in KwaZulu-Natal on the 17th of September 2022. Further notes that this year's celebration were the first since the passing of the late King Zwelithini, and further marks the wide acceptance by the Zulu people of the kingship of Isilo uMisuzulu. Acknowledges that Umkhosi Womhlanga is a very important cultural event and quest to keep young people rooted in the culture and to address the social ills facing today's youth in the troubled society. Further acknowledges that the event provides young girls with opportunities to partake in an event that invokes national pride, which offers them a sense of belonging and for keeping their culture and heritage intact. Commends the Zulu Monarch, particularly the late Queen Mantfombi Dlamini, who played a crucial role in the revival of this ancient cultural event that is a source of pride, not only for the Zulu nation, but to Africans across the continent. We send congratulation messages to the King Misuzulu Zwelithini for holding a successful Umkhosi Womhlanga. I so move.
Thank you. Mam Hlonyani, siyazi ukuthi uyafunda kodwa asihlonipheni siphakame. Please. ANC.
Thank you. Yeah.
Go on.
Thank you, House Chair. On behalf of the African National Congress, I want the House to note with sadness the passing on of a popular musician who was part of the popular music group Alaska from Soweto, Thabo Tibo Tsotetsi, on Sunday, 11th September, as after a short illness. Alaska formed part of the popular township music genre known in the country as Kwaito. Recalls that Alaska started with 5 members made up of Lucky Mlakana, Thabo Tsotetsi, Andrew Mloisane, Piwe Pickett, and Les Maada, but had later become a trio consisting of Sipiwe, Les, and Thabo. And also recalls that Alaska was known for hit songs such as Alaska and Accuse. Remembers that Thabo, popular known as Crazy T, was more than just a musician, but also a talented hairstylist, and extends its heartfelt condolences to the entire family and friends of Thabo Tsotetsi. I so move. Thank you, Chair.
My apologies. I did not put the motion of the EFF to the House. Are there any objections? No objections agreed to. The ANC's motion, are there any objections to the motion? None agreed to. IFP,
Yabonga Sir. On behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party, I move that the House notes the passing of Dr. Dumisani Blasius Kumalo, chairperson of the Lesotho Royal Council and a senior advisor to His Majesty King Misuzulu Zwelithini, King of the Zulu Nation, Bayeta. Further notes that it is extremely painful that this criminal act marred an otherwise successful reed-dance ceremony. Acknowledges that Dr. Kumalo was a man of great integrity and wisdom, and his guidance on complex matters was invaluable to the council and to the king. Extends its deepest condolences to the Kumalo family on the shocking and painful loss, and calls on the full might of the law to take its course in bringing the perpetrators to book. I thank you.
thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? None agreed to. FF Plus,
Thank you, House Chairperson. I rise on behalf of a Freedom Front Plus. But the House notes that the Afrikaanse Taal en Kultuurvereniging annually presents a public debating competition. Further notes that this is a long-standing tradition that existed for many years. Understands that Katlego Molakeng, a matric student at Afrikaans Hoërseun School in Pretoria, participated in this competition and achieved 3rd place in the additional language category. Further understands that this competition enables learners to expand their language skills and learn languages other than their own mother tongue. Realizes that Katlego Molakeng had participated in public debating competitions since his primary school years and continued in this competition since grade 8 and every year thereafter. Acknowledges that various topics of discussion are offered to learners in order to be able to participate in this competition. Further acknowledges that according to Katlego Molakeng, this competition made him well aware of his identity his roots in society, his language, culture, and family ties, and that he is a proud Sotho and South African member of a community who mastered Afrikaans, and resolves that this House congratulates him and the Afrikaans Hoërseun School for his exceptional achievement. I so move, House Chairperson.
Baie dankie. Enige een teen die motie? Geen, die motie is daar ondersteun. ANC?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Umbutho wesizwe, African National Congress, yazisa izithobile nangusizi ukusweleka kukankosikazi uNontando Maqoma, unkosikazi yamajini Traditional Council amahahabe ngosuku lwe-11 kaSeptemba 2022 emva kogulo okufutshane. I-ANC kona njalo yazi kakuhle le nkosazana ibinaminyaka engama-68, unkosikazi uNontando Maqoma, inkosikazi kaNkosana uSiqithi Maqoma, ibe sisishoshovu sokutshintsha impilo yabantu bakhe kwindawo abehlala kuyo. Siqonda kakuhle yaye siyazisa ukuba le nkosazana ngokuthobeka okukhulu ibathandile abantu bayo, ibasebenzele, ibathande kangangokuba ibithanda ukubona ukutshintsha kwempilo yabo apho behleli khona. Singabantu bombutho wesizwe, abantu baseMpuma Koloni nezizwe zonke, sihlanganisa izandla, sithobile sisithi kwaba bantu baphetheyo ngokwendalo akuhlanga lungihlanga, amahahabe mawalithathe ukufa njengesiqhelo nangona kungenjalo. Si-ANC sithi mabalale ngoxolo. I thank you, Chair.
Sithokoze. Ukhona ophikisana nalo motion? Nangekho uvumelekile, siyathokoza. ACGP? ACGP?
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. On behalf of the African Christian Democratic Party, I move without notice that the House congratulates the Springboks on their 36-20 win against the Pumas in Argentina on Saturday, the 17th of October this year. Also noting that this comes hot on the heels of their 24-8 defeat of the Australians. Wishes the Springboks well in their future rugby games. I so move.
Thank you. Anyone against the motion? No objections agreed to. UDM? ATM? The DA?
I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that the number of staff and members of Parliament participated in the Comrades Marathon on 28 August 2022. Further notes that the ultra marathon was run over an 89-kilometer distance from Pietermaritzburg to Durban and had to be completed within a 12-hour cutoff period. Acknowledges that the team that presented the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa achieved a 100% success rate in completing the ultra marathon. Congratulates Mpho Matabate, Marimetsa Molekwa, Anele Jinja, Calvin Manjani, Adrian Roos for successfully completing the Comrades Marathon. Conveys its thanks to the Parliament Athletic Club for support team of Vincent Mazingi and Tiagana Molapi for assisting the runners during the marathon. I so move.
Thank you. Any objections to the motion? None agreed to. EFF?
Thank you, House Chair. I rise on behalf of the economic freedom fighters to move without notice that the House notes the publication of the Chinese government's 14th five-year plan for fishery development, a blueprint for the sector until the end of 2025. Further notes that China's annual aquaculture output is expected to increase to 59 million tons, while the limit for wild catch in Chinese coastal waters will remain at 10 million tons, and the number of large and medium-sized fishing vessels will be reduced. Acknowledges the significant contribution that aquaculture has made, not just in China, but globally in addressing important socio-economic priorities. Further acknowledges that in South Africa, aquaculture contributes only 0.8% of fish production, which amounts to 0.7 billion rand, or 0.2% of South Africa's GDP. And despite these low figures, that as far back as 2013, the South African government recognized aquaculture as a priority subsector in the development of South Africa's ocean economy, commends the Chinese government for the rapid growth in aquaculture over the past 2 decades that has shifted the makeup of China's seafood production, sends its warm regards to the government of the People's Republic of China, and in particular its agriculture ministry.
Thank
for
you.
the strides it has made in using
Your time is
aquaculture
up,
as one of
honorable
the main
member.
vehicles for creating
Honorable
jobs.
Paulson, your time is up.
I so
Anyone against or stand against the motion? No objections, agreed to. ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes that after the heartbreak of losing her youngest daughter in 2016, Mandisa Raje was moved to open up her home for children in need of parental love and care. Further notes that the East London resident has provided a safe and loving home to 7 foster care children for the past 6 years and believes that every child deserves a mother's love. Acknowledges that she established an organization, Ubuhle Bethu, with the hope of creating a safe space for children in foster care and to build a home for children that are in transit and waiting for foster care placements or adoption processes. Further acknowledges that Ubuhle Bethu also now runs HIV, TB, and gender-based violence awareness campaigns, as well as social human rights and social security programs. Understand that she also encouraged other families to open their homes and take in children who were in need, and has also provided employment to other people through her organization, and offers its gratitude to her and wishes her well in all the work that she does for her community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any objections to the motion? None agreed to. Good. NFP.
Thank you, House Chairperson. On behalf of the National Freedom Party, I move without notice that this House note that the mining community of Rivoli Extension, Roodepoort are endangered due to illegal mining activities in the area. Further note that despite raising these concerns for many years, neither of departments of police or mineral resources and energy have addressed this with satisfactory result. Also understand that a gas line, fuel line, and water supply runs through these communities where illegal mining is being conducted and explosives are detonated. Further notes or understands that this poses a great risk to these communities and it's a ticking time bomb that could explode at any given time. Also realizes that tens of thousands of lives will be lost and damaged to the extent of, wherefore we call upon this House to intervene as a matter of urgency to call upon the relevant department authority to address the concern of this community and prevent a disaster. Also call upon this Honorable House to ensure that the relevant department report to Parliament on what measures are being taken with time frames to address the critical situation in the areas of Rivoli Extension, Roodepoort. Calls upon the relevant department authority to address the concerns of this community and prevent a disaster and ensure that measures are put in place to deal with the situation in Roodepoort, Rivoli, and Rivoli Extension. I so move.
Thank you. Any objection to the motion? None agreed to. ANC.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes that Bekisisa Samora Dlamini, a miner who shot dead a Ekurhuleni Metropolis in June 2021, was sentenced to life imprisonment and an additional 103 years on Tuesday, the 12th of September 2022. Records that Van der Lind and 5 colleagues were conducting a raid at an illegal mine near Primrose when Dlamini and 4 other illegal miners opened fire on them. Further recalls that Dlamini was arrested at the scene while the other 4 managed to escape. Understand that he has been convicted of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, possession of a prohibited firearm, and unlawful possession of ammunition, and welcomes the correct sentence given to Dlamini with the hope that it will serve as a deterrent to other murderers. Continue to pay our respects to the family of Officer Johannes Jacobus van Linde. I so move. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any objections to the motion? No objections agreed to. The AIC. Cope. ANC.
The ANC moves without notice that the House notes that Mihlema Kondana, a grade 10 learner from Churo, Durbanville, has been selected to represent South Africa as a member of SAMKA national team to the Majorette World Championship in Croatia on Thursday. Understands that Mihle is one of the athletes who is recognized by the association as well as SASCOC. Acknowledges that not only is she representing the school or teams, but the country in her chosen sport. Recognizes that this is the highest honor that an athlete can be awarded within their sport, and congratulates Mihle Makondana and wishes her the best when she completes at the World Championships. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? No objections. Agreed to the DA.
I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that Mr. Christian Diedrichs, a celebrated South African contemporary artist, has dedicated his life to fighting against all forms of racism, oppression, and discrimination, fighting for gender identity and body politics, reconciliation, and unity through his artwork. Acknowledges that after 30 years of being an artist, Mr. Diedrichs is now considered a master printmaker, an honor that is bestowed on so few. Recalls that Mr. Diedrichs has received and won a number of local and international awards and accolades during his illustrious career. Remembers that Mr. Diedrichs described his 2019 exhibition In Search of a New King as a more challenging journey, investigating the fraught and complex nature of South African identity politics from a politically inclusive and painfully honest perspective. Also remembers that Mr. Diedrichs won the coveted Canna Award for Fine Arts at the ABSA KKNK Arts Festival for his exhibition Secrets and Lies, Her Majesty's Ivory Tower in 2006. Also recalls that Mr. Diedrichs was awarded a number of artist residencies at a number of prestigious international institutions. Congratulates Mr. Diedrichs on his achievements, convey its thanks to Mr. Diedrichs for the contribution he has made to South African art, and wishes him well in his future endeavors. I so move.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? None. Agreed to. PAC. Al-Jama.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. I move without notice that the House notes the extraordinary work done by Gasilas and Gasils, who wash and prepare the bodies of Muslims for burial. Further notice that they are also known as Tukamanis, realizes that they are readily available 24/7 when the need arises. Further realizes that they form an integral part within the Muslim community. I understand that over the years, Muslim burial services organize themselves, and that these people play a very important role. Further understands that many work under extreme harsh conditions, especially during COVID, acknowledges they often go beyond their role, and further acknowledges their selfless role played in the Muslim community. And I so move that the House salutes and honor the Tukamanis. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? Honorable members, we're still here. The orders are still continuing. We are not done yet. Please. No objection to Al-Jama, and the motion is thus agreed to. ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes that the United Nations, UN, celebrates the International Day of Sign Languages on the 23rd of September each year. Further notes that the International Day of Sign Languages is celebrated on this day since the World Federation of the Deaf, FWD, was founded on this day in 1951. Acknowledges that there are over 72 million deaf individuals in the world, and there are over 300 distinct sign languages used by them across the world. But International Sign Language is one used by deaf people in international meetings and informally when traveling and socializing. Further acknowledges that the International Day of Sign Languages is a unique opportunity to support and protect the linguistic identity of cultural diversity of all deaf people and other sign language users, and calls on all citizens to work together hand in hand to promote the recognition of the use of sign languages in all areas. I so move, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the motion? No objections, agreed to. That concludes motions without notice. The last item on the order paper is notices of motion. Member of the ANC who wishes to make a notice of a motion?
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates addressing the issue of illegal migration and illicit trafficking of goods in the vulnerable segments of the border law enforcement area. I so move. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The DA?
Islam running through.
Oh.
Then we have the
Babu Nkwankwa. Dala sikufuna la ungekho. Vala. Vala. The DA, please. It's not working. Okay.
Working, Chairperson.
Yeah, move next door. It's fine.
Thank you, Chairperson. Here we go again. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I hereby move that this House, at its next sitting, debates the South African Police Services inability to stem the ever-rising crime wave and its devastating impact on the country. I so move.
Thank you. EFF?
Thank you, House Chair. I rise on behalf of the EFF for the House to debate in its next sitting the deplorable state of municipalities in the Northwest Province. Municipalities in that dysfunctional province are plagued by leadership instability, lack of accountability, and little to no service delivery. Weak financial controls, continued over-reliance on consultants, deteriorating financial health, which leads in service delivery delay, and the recycling of failed municipal managers who came through Section 139, 1B of the provincial intervention. I so move.
Thank you. The ANC?
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that in the next sitting, the House debates science, technology, innovation are important factors to promote and achieve employment, taking South Africa out of poverty and reducing inequality. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you. IFP?
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. Noting and notwithstanding that all rights and freedoms are constitutionally enshrined and entrenched, I hereby move on behalf of the mighty Inkatha Freedom Party, that at its next sitting, the House debates the responsibilities and accountability associated with rights to prevent the abuse and or negligent application and exercise of rights and constitutional freedoms. I so move.
Thank
Ward
you.
12.
FF Plus?
Thank you, Chairperson. I hereby give notice that on the next sitting of the House, I shall move on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus that the House debates the possible solutions to address the critical water shortages experienced by certain areas of Polokwane, Limpopo, due to Lepelle Northern Water's inability to repair the water supply to these communities. I so move. Thank you.
Thank you. Order, honorable members. What is? Can you please switch off that mic there? Honorable Van Dijk, yes, please. Order, honorable members. ANC,
I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates the acceleration of the implementation of the three-stream curriculum model of basic education. I so move, Chair.
thank you. The ACDP,
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACD,
wait, Reverend. Nehemiah Naseblief. Proceed.
the ACDP will move at the next sitting of the House that the House debates the recent announcement by Stats South Africa that GDP contracted by 0.7% in the second quarter of this year and the impact that this contraction will have on public finances, job creation, and poverty alleviation in the country.
Thank you. UDM. Buya again, Kwang. Honorable Kwangwa.
House Chair, thank you, and sorry for earlier. House Chair, I shall move at the next sitting of the House that the House debates the lack of maintenance of the water infrastructure in many parts of the rural Eastern Cape, which leads to lack of water in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you. ATM. The DA.
House Chairperson, I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance.
Honorable speech. Honorable, am I right?
How the rolling electricity
Honorable
blackout
King,
exacerbates
Honorable
food
King.
insecurity.
Can you
Can you hear me,
maybe
Chairperson?
mute your video so that you can be audible? We can't hear.
Okay, Chairperson, I've
Yes.
muted my video. Can I start over?
You can start, yes. We didn't hear
Okay.
anything.
Okay. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, the House debates how the rolling electricity blackout exacerbates food insecurity and hampers teaching and learning at institutions of higher learning. I so move.
Thank you. The EFF.
Chairperson, I stand on behalf of EFF that in the next sitting, the House debate about the suffering of the people of Free State, Malutia Pofung in particular, Kwakwa, that under the government of democracy, people are still drinking water with pigs and cattle and are not having electricity even if there is no load shedding, let alone the spillages. I so move.
Thank you. Sibizani leyo khona yaga House Whip. Ikhona ka House Whip. Sibizani. ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. I move on behalf of the African National Congress that the House in its next sitting debates a review of homeschooling.
Thank you. Good. NFP. NFP. Okay.
Chair, I see that the host has disabled me, but that's fine.
Order, honorable members. Honorable Mansour, wait a bit. We must
Okay.
hear the motions. They must go into the recordings. Please, we can't hear. Proceed, Honorable Mansour.
Yeah, Chairperson, I'm going to apologize. I think my video, it says the host has disabled me, so I don't know. But anyway, on behalf of the NFP, I move that its next sitting, this House deliberates on the abuse, harassment, intimidation, rape, and murder of Palestinian people by Israel, and resolves to downgrade the South African Embassy in Israel to a liaison office until such time Israel stops the hostilities against the Palestinian people, respects the rights of Palestinian people who have been dispossessed from the land and property to exist, and complies with all international agreements adhered to. I so move.
Thank you. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates defining the role of arts, culture, and heritage in the transformation of society. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you. The AIC. Cope. The ANC.
House Chair, I hereby move on behalf of the gigantic ANC that in its next sitting House, it debates the pursuing of progressive internationalism in a changing world. So I move.
Thank you. Ay, Nieman. Bach. DA.
Ek gee hiermee namens die Demokratiese Alliansie kennis dat die huis met 'n volgende sitting en debat voer oor die gebrekkige toestand van munisipale infrastruktuur met spesifieke verwysing na die gebrekkige water en riool-infrastruktuur in die Kamiesberg munisipale area. Ek stel so voor.
Thank you. PAC. Al-Jama.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair Al-Jamba moves that a presidential renewal plan promised in 2013 be presented to the El Dorado Park 5 NGOs fighting drugs and gangsterism. Thank you very much.
Thank you. ANC.
Go.
Thank you, House Chair and honorable members. I hereby move on behalf of the African National Congress that this House in the next sitting debate the evolution of broadcasting from traditional means of transmission to technological advance. Can I be protected, Chair?
Stel de mensen. Gaan aan, Honorable Mosop.
To technological advance forms, that is digital broadcasting and new platforms. I so move. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you. Honorable members, that concludes notices of motion and the business for the day. The House is adjourned. Thank you. Mbube, you can sing, Mbube, now.